The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Starfleet had charted thousands of star systems, catalogued countless species, and mapped the very fabric of spacetime itself. But what happens when something appears that defies every sensor, every theory, every rational explanation? What happens when a being arrives who shouldn't exist, who cannot exist, yet does? Captain James T. Kirk stood on the bridge of the USS Enterprise, studying the viewscreen with narrowed eyes. The spatial anomaly hung in space like a wound in reality itself, pulsing with energy signatures that made his science officer's tricorder readings look like abstract art. Spock, report. The Vulcan's fingers danced across his console, his expression maintaining its characteristic stoicism even as his instruments delivered increasingly impossible data. Fascinating, Captain. The anomaly is generating energy output equivalent to a small star, yet it occupies a space no larger than a shuttlecraft. The readings are contradictory. Matter and energy appear to be converting simultaneously in both directions. In English, Spock. It should not exist, Captain. Yet it does. Kirk felt the familiar tingle of anticipation that came before every significant discovery. They were 3 light-years from the Romulan Neutral Zone, on a routine patrol that had suddenly become anything but routine. Distance? 200,000 kilometers and closing, Lieutenant Sulu reported from the helm. The anomaly is moving toward us. Moving? Kirk leaned forward. Or drifting? Definitely under power, sir. Course is too precise to be natural drift. Red alert. Shields up. Uhura, hail whatever that is on all frequencies. The bridge lights dimmed to crimson as klaxons sounded. Uhura's hands moved across her communications panel, her Swahili accent crisp with professionalism. Hailing on all standard frequencies, Captain. No response. The anomaly continued its approach, and Kirk watched as his crew moved with practiced efficiency. This was the frontier, the edge of known space where anything could happen. The Enterprise had faced Romulans, Klingon, energy beings, and entities that defied classification. But something about this felt different. Captain, Spock said, his tone carrying a note that Kirk had learned to recognize as surprise, sensors are detecting a humanoid life form within the anomaly. Life signs? Affirmative. Single humanoid, but the readings are extraordinary. Cellular structure unlike anything in our databases. The being appears to be surviving in hard vacuum without any visible life support. McCoy's voice crackled over the intercom. Jim, that's impossible. No humanoid can survive vacuum exposure without protection. Apparently this one can. Bones. Stand by in sickbay. The anomaly suddenly collapsed inward, folding space like paper being crumpled. The Enterprise shuddered as gravitational waves washed over the deflector shields. When the distortion cleared, something impossible floated 200 meters off the starboard bow. A man. He hung in the void of space, arms at his sides, completely unprotected. No environmental suit, no breathing apparatus, just a figure in a blue uniform with a red cape that shouldn't have been billowing in the vacuum but somehow was. The man's eyes were closed, his face peaceful, as if he were merely sleeping rather than floating in the deadliest environment imaginable. Magnify, Kirk ordered. The view screen zoomed in, and Kirk studied the impossible figure. Human, or humanoid at least. Dark hair, strong features, a symbol on his chest that looked like a stylized S enclosed in a diamond shield. The uniform was unlike anything Kirk had seen, more colorful and theatrical than practical. Life signs, Mr. Spock. Incredibly strong, Captain. Heart rate approximately 40 beats per minute. Brain activity suggests consciousness, though subdued. The being appears to be in a meditative state. I am also detecting. Spock paused, recalibrating his instruments. Captain, I am detecting cellular energy absorption directly from the solar radiation of this system star. Photosynthesis? Far more complex. The being's cellular structure is converting stellar radiation into biological energy at an efficiency that should be thermodynamically impossible. If these readings are accurate, he is essentially a living solar battery. Kirk made his decision. Transporter room, lock onto the humanoid and beam him directly to sickbay. Security team to sickbay immediately. Aye, Captain, came the response. The figure on the viewscreen shimmered and vanished in a column of sparkling light. Kirk was already moving toward the turbolift. Spock, you're with me. Sulu, you have the con. Maintain yellow alert and continue monitoring for additional anomalies. The turbolift descended swiftly, and Kirk felt his pulse quicken. In his years commanding the Enterprise, he'd learned to trust his instincts. Something significant had just happened, something that would ripple far beyond this moment. The sickbay doors hissed open to reveal organized chaos. Security officers had their phasers trained on the bio bed where the impossible man now lay. McCoy stood nearby, tricorder in hand, his face a mixture of medical fascination and southern skepticism. Jim, you're not going to believe this, McCoy said without preamble. Try me, Bones. His cellular structure is unlike anything I've ever seen. It's humanoid, remarkably similar to human, actually, but different at the molecular level. His cells are absorbing the energy from our lighting systems. Every light source in this room is essentially feeding him. The man's eyes opened. They were blue, impossibly, startlingly blue, and filled with confusion as they swept across the unfamiliar surroundings. He sat up with fluid grace, and Kirk noticed that none of the security officers had moved to stop him. Perhaps they sensed, as Kirk did, that their phasers would be irrelevant if this being meant harm. Where am I? The man's voice was deep, calm, tinged with an accent Kirk couldn't quite place. This isn't, he looked down at his hands, then at the unfamiliar faces surrounding him. Who are you? Kirk stepped forward slowly, hands visible and open. I'm Captain James T. Kirk of the United Federation of Planets Starship Enterprise. You're aboard our vessel. We found you floating in space near a spatial anomaly. Can you tell us your name? The man's expression shifted from confusion to careful assessment. Kirk recognized the look, a trained response, evaluating potential threats. Whoever this being was, he'd been in dangerous situations before. My name is Kal-El, the man said carefully. Though most people know me as Clark Kent. He paused, studying Kirk's face. But you have no idea what that means, do you? I'm afraid not. Where are you from? Earth. Clark Kent, or Kal-El, looked around the sickbay again, his gaze lingering on the advanced medical equipment. But I'm beginning to think it's not the same Earth, you know. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. Spock approached with his tricorder extended. May I scan you? Your biological readings are unprecedented. Clark nodded slowly. You won't find anything that makes sense. I'm not from your universe. Kirk exchanged glances with Spock, then looked back at their guest. Then I think we need to talk. Dr. McCoy, is he in any immediate medical danger? Hell, Jim, he's healthier than anyone I've ever examined. Whatever he is, he's in perfect condition. Good. Kirk gestured toward the sickbay's consultation room. Mr. Kent, would you mind answering some questions? Starting with how you survived in vacuum without protection, and what exactly brought you here? Clark stood, and Kirk was struck by the man's presence, not threatening, but undeniably powerful. There was something in the way he carried himself, a quiet confidence that came from knowing he could handle whatever came next. I'll tell you everything I can, Captain, Clark said. But I have a feeling that what I say is going to sound impossible. Kirk allowed himself a slight smile. Mr. Kent, I command a starship that travels faster than light. We've encountered beings of pure energy, planets that think, and civilizations that exist in nonlinear time. Impossible is just another word for, we haven't figured it out yet. Clark returned the smile, and some of the tension left his shoulders. Then maybe we can help each other. Because I need to find a way home, and something tells me that's not going to be easy. As they moved toward the consultation room, Kirk couldn't shake the feeling that everything had just changed. The consultation room was small, designed for private medical discussions rather than first contact scenarios. Kirk sat across from Clark Kent, while Spock stood nearby, tricorder still recording data. McCoy leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his expression somewhere between fascination and professional concern. You said you're from Earth, Kirk began, keeping his tone conversational rather than interrogative. Tell me about it. Clark's jaw tightened slightly. It's a planet in what you'd call the Sol system. Third from the sun. Continents, oceans, billions of people. But I wasn't born there. He met Kirk's eyes directly. I'm from a planet called Krypton. It was destroyed when I was an infant. My parents sent me to Earth in an experimental spacecraft, the last survivor of my species. The last of your kind, Kirk said softly, understanding the weight of those words. He'd met enough refugees, enough Sol survivors, to recognize the particular loneliness in Clark's voice. Captain, Spock interjected, his physiological readings suggest he is indeed of extraterrestrial origin. However, his cellular structure has adapted to absorb and metabolize specific wavelengths of solar radiation. This adaptation is so efficient that it grants him abilities far beyond normal humanoid parameters. What kind of abilities? McCoy asked. Clark hesitated, then stood. He reached for the edge of the examination table, solid duranium alloy designed to support equipment weighing several hundred kilograms. With one hand, he lifted it as easily as Kirk might lift a coffee cup. The medical equipment on its surface didn't even shift. McCoy whistled low. Sweet mother of strength, Clark said, setting the table down gently. Far beyond human norms. Also invulnerability to most forms of physical harm, enhanced sensory perception, flight capability, and, he paused, and his eyes began to glow with a soft red light. Heat vision. Focused thermal energy. The glow faded, and Clark sat back down. On my Earth, I use these abilities to help people. To protect those who can't protect themselves. But here, he gestured around the room. I don't know what here even is. Kirk processed this carefully. A being with the power to lift starship components, survive vacuum, and project thermal energy. In the wrong hands, or with the wrong intentions, such abilities could destabilize the entire quadrant. Yet there was something in Clark's demeanor that spoke of restraint, of careful control. You mentioned you need to find a way home, Kirk said. What brought you here? I was investigating a Kryptonian probe, technology from my birth world that somehow survived its destruction. When I activated it, there was an energy discharge. Everything went white, and then I was floating in space, watching your ship approach. Clark's expression darkened. I don't know if I can get back. I don't even know if the probe still exists. Spock's tricorder beeped. Captain, I may have relevant information. Before the anomaly collapsed, I recorded residual energy signatures. They matched theoretical models of dimensional bridge formation, passages between parallel universes or alternate realities. If Mr. Kent's probe created such a bridge, it would explain both his arrival and the anomaly's unusual properties. Can we recreate it? Clark asked, hope flickering across his face. Unknown. The energy requirements would be substantial, and without understanding the original technology. I can help with that, Clark interrupted. I know Kryptonian science. If you have the probe, or even fragments of it, I might be able to reconstruct what happened. Kirk stood, pacing slowly. This was the moment where command decisions either built trust or destroyed it. He could confine this stranger, treat him as a potential threat, lock him in the brig behind force fields and study him like a specimen. Or he could take a risk. Mr. Spock, organize a scan of the area where we first detected the anomaly. If there are any probe fragments, I want them found and brought aboard. Mr. Kent, Kirk turned to face him directly. I'm going to extend you the courtesy of treating you as what you appear to be, someone who needs help. But I need you to understand something. This ship carries 430 crew members. We're 3 light-years from the Romulan Neutral Zone, in an area of space where tensions run high and mistakes cost lives. Your abilities make you, potentially, the most dangerous individual in this sector. Clark's expression remained steady. I understand, Captain. And I give you my word, I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to go home. Your word. Kirk studied him for a long moment. On my Earth, we have a saying, actions speak louder than words. I'm going to trust you, Mr. Kent, but trust is fragile. Don't give me a reason to regret it. You won't. The intercom whistled. Bridge to Captain Kirk. Kirk moved to the wall panel. Kirk here. Captain, we're being hailed by a Klingon battle cruiser. They've dropped out of warp 200,000 kilometers off our port bow. Commander Kor is demanding to speak with you. Kirk's stomach tightened. Kor, one of the Empire's most aggressive commanders, with a reputation for turning diplomatic incidents into shooting wars. On my way. Red alert. He looked at Clark. Mr. Kent, I need you to stay in sickbay for now. Dr. McCoy will ensure you're comfortable. The Klingon, Clark said, standing. Are they hostile? They're complicated, Kirk replied. Warriors with a rigid code of honor. Dangerous, but predictable if you understand their culture. Why? Because I can hear them. Clark's eyes unfocused slightly. Their ship, I can hear voices, machinery, weapons systems powering up. They're arguing about something. About me. Kirk exchanged glances with Spock. You can hear through space? Across 200,000 kilometers. Enhanced hearing. I can filter out background noise and focus on specific sounds. They know I'm here, Captain. Someone on that ship is very interested in the being that survives without protection in vacuum. McCoy swore under his breath. Jim, if the Klingon know about him. Then we have a diplomatic situation on our hands, Kirk finished. He looked at Clark seriously. The Klingon Empire values strength and combat prowess above all else. If they perceive you as a potential weapon or worthy opponent, they won't rest until they've tested you in battle. I don't want to fight them. You may not have a choice. Stay here. Spock, with me. Kirk strode toward the turbolift, his mind already running through scenarios. The Klingon had somehow detected Clark's presence, possibly from the spatial anomaly, or perhaps they'd been monitoring this sector and witnessed his rescue. Either way, Kor wouldn't simply accept diplomatic pleasantries and move on. The Klingon commander would want answers, demonstrations, possibly blood. The bridge was tense when Kirk emerged from the turbolift. On the view screen, the Klingon battle cruiser hung like a predator, its hull bristling with disruptor arrays and torpedo tubes. The design was unmistakable, a D-7 class cruiser, capable of matching the Enterprise in firepower. Open a channel, Kirk ordered, settling into his command chair. The view screen flickered, and Commander Kor's face filled the screen. The Klingon commander was younger than Kirk had expected, with sharp features and eyes that gleamed with barely contained aggression. His uniform bore the insignia of a ship commander, and a ceremonial dagger hung at his belt. Captain Kirk, Kor said, his voice carrying the guttural accent of the Empire. How fortunate to encounter the famous Enterprise so far from Federation space. Commander Core. This is Federation patrol space, well within our territorial boundaries. What brings a Klingon battle cruiser to this sector? Core's smile was predatory. We detected unusual energy readings. A spatial phenomenon that suggested advanced technology, possibly a cloaking device or experimental weapon. Imagine our surprise when our sensors revealed something far more interesting. He leaned forward. You have aboard your ship a being of considerable power. A warrior who can survive in vacuum, who radiates energy like a small sun. We wish to meet this individual. Kirk kept his expression neutral. I'm afraid I don't discuss my crew or passengers with foreign powers, Commander. If you're finished investigating the spatial anomaly, I suggest you continue on your patrol route. Oh, I think not. Core's smile widened. You see, Captain, the Empire has laws about powerful beings. If such an entity exists within Klingon-accessible space, we have the right to challenge it, to test whether it is worthy of respect or merely another Federation curiosity to be catalogued and forgotten. This being is under Federation protection. Then the Federation shelters a warrior from honorable combat. How typical. Core's tone dripped with contempt. Perhaps I should report to the High Council that Starfleet now collects gods as pets. I'm sure they would find that information most illuminating. Kirk felt the trap closing. If he refused to allow contact, Core would spin this as Federation weakness or, worse, evidence that they were developing some kind of superweapon. If he allowed it, he'd be putting Clark in direct contact with warriors who would see him as either a threat to be eliminated or a prize to be claimed. Captain, Spock said quietly, Commander Core is correct by Klingon legal standards. If they believe a powerful warrior exists in contested space, treaty provisions allow them to issue a challenge. Refusing could be interpreted as a violation of our agreements. Kirk's jaw tightened. He'd hoped for time to understand what Clark was, time to find a way to send him home, time to avoid exactly this kind of confrontation. But time had just run out. Commander Core, I'll need to consult with the individual in question. Stand by. I will give you 1 hour, Captain Kirk. After that, I will assume you are concealing a weapon and respond accordingly. The screen went dark. Kirk stood, his mind racing through options. Spock, what are the chances Core will simply accept a polite no? Approximately 0.03%, Captain. Commander Core has a documented history of escalating minor diplomatic incidents into armed confrontations. If we refuse his request, he will likely attack. Wonderful. Kirk moved toward the turbolift. Lieutenant Uhura, get me Starfleet Command. Priority channel. And someone find out everything we can about Klingon challenge protocols. If we're doing this, we're doing it by their rules. As the turbolift doors closed, Kirk allowed himself a moment of frustration. They'd rescued a man from certain death, and now that mercy was about to drag them into a confrontation with an empire that respected only strength. He just hoped Clark Kent understood what he was asking for, because in 1 hour, the Man of Steel was about to meet warriors who lived for battle and died for honor. And in the cold vacuum between the Enterprise and the Klingon cruiser, the quadrant's delicate balance of power had just shifted into unknown territory. Kirk found Clark Kent exactly where he'd left him, standing near the sickbay viewport, watching the stars. McCoy hovered nearby, medical tricorder still in hand, occasionally glancing at readings that clearly fascinated and frustrated him in equal measure. Mr. Kent, we have a situation. Clark turned from the viewport, and Kirk noticed how the man carried himself, not with arrogance, but with the quiet confidence of someone who'd faced impossible odds before. The Klingon want to meet me. You heard? Super hearing, remember? Commander Core doesn't seem like someone who takes no for an answer. Kirk nodded, pulling up a chair and gesturing for Clark to sit. The Klingon Empire has a very specific cultural framework. They value honor, combat prowess, and direct confrontation above all else. When Core detected your energy signature, he interpreted it as evidence of a powerful warrior, and in Klingon culture, powerful warriors must be challenged, tested, proven worthy. Or destroyed, Clark said quietly. Or destroyed, Kirk confirmed. I can refuse his request, but that will likely result in a battle between our ships. 430 crew members against a Klingon battle cruiser in the middle of contested space. Or, he paused, choosing his words carefully. You could meet with him. Show him you're not a threat, demonstrate restraint, and defuse the situation diplomatically. Clark's expression darkened. You want me to let them test me in combat? I want you to help me prevent a war. Kirk leaned forward. Mr. Kent, I understand you don't know our universe, our politics, our alliances. But out here, on the frontier, perception matters. If the Klingon believe the Federation is harboring some kind of ultimate weapon, they'll report it to the High Council. That intelligence could shift the balance of power, trigger preemptive strikes, destabilize treaty negotiations that took decades to establish. So I'm supposed to just, what? Fight them? Prove I'm not dangerous by demonstrating exactly how dangerous I am? McCoy spoke up from his position near the medical console. Jim, you can't ask this man to risk himself just to satisfy some Klingon's honor code. He didn't ask to be here. I'm not asking him to risk himself, Bones. I'm asking him to help me navigate a situation that could get a lot of people killed. Kirk met Clark's eyes. You said on your Earth, you use your abilities to protect people who can't protect themselves. Right now, my crew can't protect themselves from a diplomatic incident they didn't cause. But you can. Clark was silent for a long moment, his jaw working as he processed the request. Finally, he spoke. On my Earth, there are rules. I don't kill. I don't use excessive force. I protect life, even when it's difficult, even when people make it hard. He stood, moving back to the viewport. What you're asking me to do, it goes against everything I believe. Meeting violence with violence, proving strength through combat, that's not who I am. I'm not asking you to hurt anyone, Kirk said. I'm asking you to show them that you're in control. That you're not a weapon to be feared or a prize to be claimed. Klingon respect strength, yes, but they also respect restraint. If you can demonstrate both, power held in check by choice rather than limitation, Core might back down. And if he doesn't? Kirk stood, moving to stand beside Clark at the viewport. Then we adapt. But I'd rather try diplomacy first, even if it's Klingon-style diplomacy. Spock's voice came over the intercom. Captain, we have 45 minutes remaining before Commander Core's deadline. Additionally, I have completed preliminary scans of the area where we encountered Mr. Kent. There are trace elements consistent with advanced technology, but no intact probe fragments within sensor range. Understood, Spock. Maintain scans. Kirk looked at Clark. What's it going to be? Clark turned from the viewport, and Kirk saw the weight of decision in his eyes. This wasn't a man who made choices lightly. Every action was measured, considered, filtered through a moral framework that Kirk was only beginning to understand. I'll meet with them, Clark said finally. But on my terms. I won't fight unless they force me to, and even then, I won't kill. If that's not acceptable to your Klingon commander, then we'll have to find another way. Kirk felt a mixture of relief and concern. Fair enough. Let's go to the bridge and establish contact. And Mr. Kent, he paused at the sickbay doors. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Captain. Something tells me this is about to get complicated. The bridge was a study in controlled tension when Kirk emerged with Clark in tow. Crew members tried not to stare at the man in the colorful uniform, but Kirk noticed the subtle glances, the whispered conversations quickly silenced. News traveled fast on a starship, and by now everyone aboard knew they had an unusual guest. Lieutenant Uhura, open a channel to the Klingon vessel. Aye, Captain. Channel open. Commander Kor's face appeared on the view screen, and Kirk saw the Klingon's eyes immediately lock onto Clark, standing beside the command chair. Kor's expression shifted: surprise, calculation, hunger. So, Kor said slowly, the mysterious warrior reveals himself. Tell me, Federation pet, what is your name? Clark stepped forward before Kirk could intervene. My name is Kal-El. I'm not Federation, I'm not a weapon, and I'm certainly not anyone's pet. Kor laughed, a harsh, barking sound. Spirit. I like that. You speak with pride, with certainty. These are warrior qualities. His expression hardened. But words mean nothing without strength to back them. I challenge you, Kal-El. Come aboard my vessel. Face me in single combat, and prove whether you are worthy of the power you possess. I won't fight you, Commander Kor. The Klingon's eyes narrowed. You refuse challenge? Then you are a coward, and your power is wasted. I'm not a coward, Clark said evenly. I simply don't believe in resolving disputes through violence when other options exist. If you want to talk, I'll come aboard and talk. If you want to understand what I am and where I came from, I'll explain. But I won't fight you for entertainment. Kor's hand moved to the dagger at his belt. You insult me. You insult the Empire. On my world, such words would demand satisfaction in blood. Then it's fortunate we're not on your world. Kirk watched the exchange with growing concern. Clark's moral stance was admirable, but it was also dangerously naive. Klingon didn't respect pacifism, they saw it as weakness, and weakness invited aggression. Commander Kor, Kirk interjected, perhaps there's a compromise. Mr. Kal-El could demonstrate his abilities without engaging in direct combat. A display of power, if you will, that satisfies your curiosity without requiring bloodshed. Kor's attention shifted to Kirk, then back to Clark. A demonstration. Interesting. Very well, Captain Kirk. Let your warrior show us what he can do. But be warned, if his power is insufficient, if he proves to be merely another Federation fabrication, I will consider it an act of deception. And deception demands consequences. The screen went dark before Kirk could respond. Well, McCoy said from his station, that went about as well as expected. Jim, you sure you know what you're doing? No, Bones, but I'm committed now. Kirk turned to Clark. Can you do this? Show them something impressive without hurting anyone? Clark nodded slowly. I can. But Captain, you should know, my abilities don't work quite the same way here. When I first arrived, everything felt muted. Like trying to move through water instead of air. It's getting better as I adjust, but I'm not at full capacity yet. Spock looked up from his science station. That would be consistent with dimensional adaptation syndrome. Your cellular structure is optimized for your native universe's physical constants. Here, subtle variations in subspace harmonics, gravitational coefficients, and electromagnetic field strengths would create interference. Given time and exposure to this universe's stellar radiation, you should achieve full functionality. How much time? Kirk asked. Unknown. Hours, days, possibly weeks depending on the complexity of Mr. Kent's biological systems. Kirk made a decision. Then we work with what we have. Mr. Sulu, take us to within transporter range of the Klingon vessel but maintain defensive distance. Yellow alert, shields at standby. Aye, Captain. The Enterprise moved smoothly through space, closing the distance with the Klingon battle cruiser. Kirk could feel the weight of command pressing down, the awareness that every decision rippled outward, affecting lives, shaping futures. Captain, Uhura said, Commander Kor is hailing us again. He's requesting that Kal-El transport to their vessel immediately. Absolutely not, Kirk replied. Tell Commander Kor that the demonstration will take place in neutral space, visible to both vessels. Mr. Kal-El will exit via our airlock, perform his demonstration, and return. Non-negotiable. There was a pause as Uhura relayed the message. Commander Kor agrees, Captain. He says he looks forward to being impressed. Clark moved toward the turbolift. Then I suppose it's time to put on a show. Captain, one question, how far can you scan? Our sensors are effective to several thousand kilometers, depending on interference. Good. Then watch carefully. Kirk followed Clark to the airlock on Deck 7, accompanied by Spock and a security detail. The Vulcan carried a communicator configured to maintain contact with Clark during his spacewalk. Mr. Kent, Spock said, offering the communicator, this device will allow us to maintain communication. Simply speak normally, and we will hear you. Clark examined the small device, then tucked it into his belt. Clever technology. On my Earth, we're still working on reliable wireless communication. Fascinating. Your Earth appears to be at a significantly earlier stage of technological development. Spock's eyebrow rose. Yet you possess abilities that exceed anything our science can produce. A curious paradox. Not a paradox, Mr. Spock. Just a reminder that technology isn't the only measure of capability. Clark moved to the airlock door. I'm ready when you are, Captain. Kirk nodded to the security officer at the control panel. Depressurize the airlock. Open outer door on my mark. Warning lights flashed as atmosphere was pumped from the chamber. Clark stood calmly in the center, seemingly unconcerned about the vacuum that would kill any normal humanoid in seconds. Outer door open. Space beckoned beyond the airlock, infinite darkness punctuated by distant stars. Clark stepped forward, and Kirk watched through the observation port as the man simply walked out into the void. For a moment, Clark floated motionless. Then, without any visible means of propulsion, he began to move. Not drifting, moving with purpose and control, as if the vacuum were merely another environment to navigate. Kirk rushed to the nearest viewport, Spock close behind. On the view screen, they could see both the Enterprise and the Klingon battle cruiser, with Clark suspended between them like a bridge between two worlds. Spock, are you recording this? Affirmative, Captain. Sensors are tracking his movements. He appears to be generating a localized field that allows him to manipulate his trajectory without conventional propulsion. The physics are highly irregular. Clark's voice came through the communicator, slightly distorted by distance. Commander Kor, you wanted a demonstration. Watch. And then Clark moved. He accelerated with impossible speed, shooting away from the Enterprise like a photon torpedo. The sensors struggled to track him as he curved through space, his trajectory a perfect arc that took him around the Klingon battle cruiser in seconds. He looped back, building speed, and Kirk realized he was watching something that shouldn't exist, a being who treated the hard vacuum of space like humans treated air. Clark came to a complete stop 500 meters directly between both ships, arms crossed, cape somehow still billowing despite the absence of atmosphere. His voice came through the communicator, calm and controlled. I can survive in vacuum indefinitely. I can move at speeds that would tear apart most spacecraft. I can see across distances that require your sensors to detect. I can hear conversations happening inside sealed vessels. He paused. I can also do this. His eyes began to glow red, a crimson light visible even across the distance. Twin beams of concentrated thermal energy shot forward, striking a piece of debris floating nearby. The metal vaporized instantly, reduced to glowing plasma that dissipated into the void. I don't want to fight, Clark continued, his voice carrying an edge of steel. I don't want to prove my strength by hurting others. But make no mistake, I am not weak, I am not a weapon, and I am not someone you can control or command. I'm here by accident, seeking a way home, and I expect to be treated with the same respect you'd give any being of power and principle." Silence filled the bridge. Kirk found himself holding his breath, watching the impossible man floating in space, challenging a Klingon battle cruiser through sheer presence rather than threats. Finally, Commander Kor's voice broke the silence, crackling through the ship-to-ship channel. "Kal-El. You are no mere warrior. You are something more, something the Empire will need to consider carefully." There was a pause, and when Kor spoke again, his tone carried grudging respect. "I withdraw my challenge. For now. But know this, the Empire will remember you. And we will meet again." The Klingon battle cruiser's engines flared, and the vessel turned, accelerating away toward the neutral zone. Kirk exhaled slowly. "Mr. Kent, you can come back inside now." Clark floated back toward the airlock, moving with the same impossible grace. When he stepped back into the Enterprise, atmosphere flooding back into the chamber, he looked tired, not physically exhausted, but emotionally drained. "Did it work?" he asked as the inner door opened. Kirk allowed himself a slight smile. "It worked. You just impressed a Klingon commander enough that he backed down without firing a shot. That's practically a miracle in interstellar diplomacy." "Good," Clark said. "Because I really don't want to have to do that again." But as they made their way back to the bridge, Kirk couldn't shake the feeling that Kor's final words carried a warning. The Empire would remember. They would watch. And somewhere in the halls of the Klingon High Council, decisions were being made about the being who survived in vacuum and challenged warriors with nothing but conviction. The demonstration was over. But the real test, Kirk suspected, was only beginning. The Enterprise bridge hummed with the familiar efficiency of a ship returning to routine operations. Sulu had set course for the coordinates where Clark's arrival had first been detected, and science teams were preparing detailed scans for any residual probe fragments. Kirk sat in his command chair, reviewing the sensor logs of Clark's demonstration, while the man himself stood near the view screen, arms crossed, staring out at the stars. "Captain," Spock said from his science station, "I have completed preliminary analysis of Mr. Kent's performance in vacuum. The energy output from his thermal vision was approximately 700,000 kilowatts, equivalent to a Class 3 phaser array operating at maximum intensity. His acceleration profile suggests he can achieve velocities in excess of warp factor 1 without mechanical assistance." "Faster than light?" Kirk asked, surprised. "In theory. However, his current capabilities appear diminished from what he described as his baseline. I would estimate he is operating at approximately 85% efficiency due to dimensional adaptation factors." Clark turned from the view screen. "It's getting easier. When I first arrived, everything felt heavy, like my powers were fighting through interference. Now it's more like static. Annoying, but manageable." "How long until you're at full capacity?" Kirk asked. "I don't know. On my Earth, my powers come from yellow sun radiation. My cells store and convert that energy into the abilities you've seen. Here," he gestured toward the view screen where a G-type star burned in the distance. "Your sun looks similar, but the radiation wavelength is slightly different. My body's adjusting, but it takes time." The turbolift doors opened, and McCoy emerged carrying a data slate and wearing his perpetually concerned expression. "Jim, I've been analyzing the medical data from our guest. His cellular structure is like nothing I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of strange biology out here." "Strange how, Bones?" McCoy pulled up a holographic display from the slate, showing cellular structures that looked almost human but fundamentally different at the molecular level. "His cells don't just absorb solar radiation, they store it like biological batteries. Every cell in his body is essentially a power generator. The energy density is astronomical. If I had to guess, I'd say a single cell from Mr. Kent contains more stored energy than our entire warp core." Clark looked uncomfortable. "Doctor, I'd appreciate if you kept that information confidential." On my Earth, people knowing exactly how my powers work has led to problems. What kind of problems? Kirk asked. The kind where governments try to weaponize me, or villains try to exploit weaknesses, or well-meaning scientists try to replicate my biology in laboratories. Clark's expression darkened. I've learned the hard way that some knowledge is dangerous in the wrong hands. Mr. Kent raises a valid concern, Captain, Spock interjected. Information about his capabilities could be strategically valuable to multiple parties. The Klingon have already demonstrated interest. The Romulans undoubtedly monitored his demonstration through cloaked observation vessels. And Section 31. Section 31. Clark interrupted. Kirk waved a hand dismissively. Starfleet Intelligence's More Covert Operations Division. Officially, they don't exist. Unofficially, they handle threats that require methods outside normal Starfleet protocols. And yes, they would absolutely be interested in you. Wonderful, Clark muttered. So I went from one government intelligence agency to another universe's version. At least some things are universal. The intercom whistled. Bridge, this is Lieutenant Hadley in Astrometrics. We've completed the scan pattern Captain Kirk requested. We've found something. Kirk leaned forward. Report. Sir, there are debris fragments scattered across a radius of approximately 50,000 kilometers from the initial anomaly point. The material composition is unlike anything in our databases, some kind of crystalline metal alloy with embedded energy matrix structures. We're detecting residual dimensional energy signatures. Can you retrieve the fragments? Clark asked urgently. Affirmative. We're deploying tractor beams now. Estimated recovery time, 40 minutes. Kirk looked at Clark. Your probe? Has to be. Kryptonian technology uses crystalline computing matrices, highly stable, incredibly dense information storage. If we can recover enough fragments, I might be able to reconstruct what happened and possibly reverse the process. Spock, work with Lieutenant Hadley. I want every fragment analyzed and catalogued. Mr. Kent, you'll assist with the technical evaluation. Kirk stood, moving toward the turbolift. I'm going to contact Starfleet Command and file a report about our encounter with Commander Kor. They'll need to know about the Klingon interest in our guest. Jim, McCoy said quietly, what are you going to tell them about Clark? Kirk paused at the turbolift doors. The truth, Bones. That we encountered a being from another dimension with extraordinary abilities, that we're attempting to help him return home, and that the situation is under control. What I won't tell them, he glanced back at Clark, is information that could compromise his safety or turn him into a strategic asset. You're protecting me, Clark said, understanding dawning. Why? Because you asked me to trust you, and you've done nothing to violate that trust. Because my first duty is to my crew and passengers, and right now, you're a passenger. And because, Kirk smiled slightly. I know what it's like to be viewed as a valuable resource rather than a person. Out here on the frontier, we take care of our own. The turbolift doors closed, and Kirk descended toward his quarters where he could make a secure transmission to Starfleet headquarters. As the lift hummed downward, he reflected on the impossible situation he'd been handed. A man from another dimension, powerful enough to concern the Klingon Empire, vulnerable enough to need protection, and driven by a moral code that Kirk found both admirable and potentially problematic. In his ready room, Kirk sat before the subspace communication terminal and initiated a priority channel to Admiral Comac at Starfleet Command. The signal took several minutes to establish. They were far from Federation core worlds, and encryption protocols added delay. Finally, Admiral Comac's stern face appeared on the screen. The Admiral was in his 60s, gray-haired and perpetually skeptical of Kirk's tendency toward unorthodox solutions. Captain Kirk. Your report indicated an encounter with Commander Kor. I trust the situation didn't escalate into open conflict. No, Admiral. We managed to resolve the situation diplomatically. However, there are complications I need to brief you on. Kirk took a breath. 3 hours ago, we encountered a spatial anomaly near the neutral zone. Within that anomaly was a humanoid individual, designation Kal-El, no surname, who appears to have crossed into our universe from a parallel dimension. Carmack's expression sharpened. Parallel dimension? Captain, such phenomena are highly theoretical. What evidence supports this conclusion? Extensive sensor data, medical analysis by Dr. McCoy, and direct testimony from the individual himself. Admiral, this being possesses abilities that defy our current understanding of physics. Enhanced strength several orders of magnitude beyond human norms, invulnerability to vacuum and extreme conditions, flight capability without mechanical assistance, and directed energy projection. He claims these abilities are natural to his species and powered by solar radiation absorption. There was a long pause as Carmack processed this information. And Commander Kor became aware of this individual? Yes, sir. The Klingon detected the spatial anomaly and intercepted us. Kor demanded to meet the being and challenged him to combat. Mr. Kal-El demonstrated his capabilities in neutral space, and Commander Kor withdrew. However, he made it clear the Empire would be watching. I see. Carmack's fingers drummed on his desk. Captain, I'm sure I don't need to explain the strategic implications. If the Klingon believe we've acquired some kind of ultimate weapon. Mr. Kal-El is not a weapon, Admiral. He's a refugee trying to return home. We've recovered fragments of the technology that brought him here, and we're working on a solution. A solution that may not exist. Captain, I'm ordering you to escort your guest to Starbase 12 where he can be properly evaluated by Starfleet Science and... With respect, Admiral, I decline. Kirk kept his voice level but firm. Mr. Kal-El has committed no crime, violated no Federation law, and poses no immediate threat. He's asked for assistance, and I've granted it. Forcing him to submit to Starfleet evaluation would violate the spirit of first contact protocols. Carmack's expression darkened. Captain, I'm not asking. This individual represents unknown capabilities that could affect the balance of power in this quadrant. The Federation Council will want answers, and so will I. You have 48 hours to complete your investigation. After that, I expect you at Starbase 12 with your guest. Is that clear? Perfectly clear, Admiral. Good. And Kirk, if the Klingon make another move, you are authorized to defend yourself, but do not escalate. The last thing we need is a war sparked by an interdimensional incident. Carmack out. The screen went dark, and Kirk sat back in his chair, exhaling slowly. 48 hours. Not nearly enough time to fully analyze Kryptonian technology, reconstruct a dimensional bridge, and send Clark home. But perhaps enough time to make progress, or at least enough time to prove they were acting in good faith. The door chimed. Come. Spock entered, carrying a data slate. Captain, the first batch of probe fragments has been recovered. Mr. Kent is examining them in Science Lab 3. His reaction suggests both hope and concern. Let's go see what we're dealing with. Science Lab 3 was a large chamber filled with analysis equipment, holographic displays, and workstations where science officers conducted experiments that couldn't be done at bridge stations. Clark stood at the central table, hovering over a collection of crystalline fragments that glowed with faint internal light. His expression was intense, focused, and Kirk could see the weight of desperate hope in every movement. Mr. Kent, Kirk said as he approached. What have you found? Clark looked up, and Kirk saw exhaustion in his eyes, not physical fatigue, but the emotional drain of someone clinging to possibility. These fragments are definitely from my probe. The crystalline structure is unique to Krypton. We grew our technology rather than manufacturing it. These crystals were programmed with information about dimensional theory, energy bridge construction, and fail-safe protocols. Can you reconstruct the bridge? Maybe. The problem is that the probe didn't just create a bridge, it tore one open by accident. The dimensional barriers between our universes aren't meant to be crossed. They exist for a reason, like bulkheads on a starship. When my probe punched through, it created instability. Clark picked up one of the larger fragments, turning it in his hands. These crystals contain partial data, but they're damaged. It's like trying to read a book where every third page is missing. Spock moved to the analysis console, pulling up holographic schematics of the fragment's internal structures. Mr. Kent, if you could provide us with the theoretical framework of Kryptonian dimensional physics, I may be able to extrapolate the missing data. Vulcan computational methods excel at pattern recognition and theoretical reconstruction. Clark hesitated. Mr. Spock, the science I'm talking about is generations ahead of what Earth, my Earth, has developed. I'm not sure I can explain it in terms you'd understand. I am Vulcan, Mr. Kent. Our civilization has been conducting space travel for over 1,000 years. While your Kryptonian science may be advanced, I am confident I can grasp the fundamental principles. A slight smile crossed Clark's face. No offense intended, Mr. Spock. Where I come from, we're still figuring out basic spaceflight. Meeting a species that's been doing it for millennia is humbling. Then perhaps we can learn from each other. Please, begin with the basic principles of how your probe was designed to function. For the next hour, Kirk watched as Clark and Spock engaged in a technical dialogue that quickly exceeded his understanding. They spoke of dimensional membranes and energy harmonics, of quantum entanglement across parallel universes, of stabilization fields and resonance frequencies. Clark sketched diagrams on holographic displays while Spock ran calculations at speeds that made Kirk's head spin. McCoy arrived halfway through, took one look at the technical discussion, and muttered, "I'm a doctor, not a dimensional physicist," before retreating to a corner to observe. Finally, Spock straightened from the console, his expression thoughtful. Fascinating. If I understand correctly, your probe was designed to locate dimensional bridges that occur naturally, weak points in the barriers between universes. However, when it couldn't find a natural bridge, it attempted to create one artificially. Exactly, Clark confirmed. But it didn't have enough power. So it drew energy from me, from my cellular structure. Kryptonian biology is essentially a living battery. The probe drained me to critical levels and used that energy to tear open a bridge. That's why I felt so weak when I first arrived. And why you're recovering as you absorb solar radiation from this universe, Kirk said, understanding clicking into place. You're recharging. Right. But here's the problem, I don't know if I can generate enough energy to open another bridge. The amount of power required is enormous, and doing it deliberately, in a controlled way, might be beyond my capabilities. Perhaps not alone, Spock said. The Enterprise warp core generates significant power. If we could synchronize the warp field harmonics with your biological energy signature and use the probe fragments as focusing crystals, we might be able to punch through, Clark finished, excitement entering his voice for the first time. Mr. Spock, that could work. It would be dangerous, any miscalculation could create a dimensional rupture that destroys both ships, but it could work. Kirk held up a hand. Gentlemen, before we start talking about punching holes in reality, I need to understand the risks. Mr. Spock, what are the chances this works? Unknown, Captain. We are operating in entirely theoretical territory. However, I estimate a 67% chance of successfully creating a stable dimensional bridge, assuming Mr. Kent's biological energy can be properly integrated with our warp field matrix. And the 33% failure rate? Catastrophic spatial collapse, Enterprise destruction, possible creation of a persistent dimensional wound that could destabilize local spacetime. Spock's tone was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing weather patterns rather than potential apocalypse. Wonderful, McCoy growled from his corner. Jim, you're not seriously considering this. Kirk looked at Clark, seeing the hope and fear warring in the man's expression. "Mr. Kent, is there any other way?" "Not that I can think of. Without the probe's full database, without understanding exactly how it opened the bridge the first time, this is our best shot." Clark's jaw tightened. "But Captain, I won't risk your ship or your crew. If there's too much danger." "There's always danger out here," Kirk interrupted. "The question is whether the risk is justified. You want to go home. I want to help you get there. But I also need to protect my crew and prevent this situation from becoming a political disaster." He paused, making his decision. "We have 48 hours before Starfleet Command expects us at Starbase 12. That gives us time to analyze the fragments, run simulations, and determine if this is feasible. If it is, we try. If it's not, we'll find another way." "Thank you, Captain." "Don't thank me yet. We still have to make this work." Kirk turned to Spock. "Begin running simulations immediately. I want every possible variable accounted for. And Mr. Kent, get some rest. You're going to need all your strength if we attempt this." As Kirk left the science lab, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something profound. Not just sending one man home, but proving that the barriers between universes could be crossed, that the impossible could become possible. But in the darkness between dimensions, where reality grew thin and strange, other forces were watching. The Klingon weren't the only ones who'd noticed the being called Kal-El. And some observers had far more sinister intentions. Lieutenant Uhura's voice cut through the bridge's routine hum with an edge of concern. "Captain, I'm picking up a distress signal. Federation colony on Sigma Draconis 3. They're reporting an attack." Kirk was on his feet immediately. "On screen. What kind of attack?" The view screen flickered to show a transmission that was heavily distorted by interference. A woman's face appeared, mid-30s, colony administrator's uniform torn and bloodied, eyes wide with fear. "Anyone receiving this, Sigma Draconis 3 is under attack. Unknown vessels, non-Federation design. They've disabled our defense grid and are targeting civilian structures. We have casualties." Static consumed the image for a moment. "Need immediate assistance." "They're not responding to hails, they're just..." The transmission cut out entirely. "Uhura, get that signal back." "I'm trying, Captain, but there's massive subspace interference. Whatever's happening down there is generating enough electromagnetic disruption to block communications." Spock was already at his science station, pulling up stellar cartography. "Captain, Sigma Draconis 3 is a mining colony, population approximately 8,000. Primarily human with some Tellarite and Andorian workers. They're located 2.7 light-years from our current position, approximately 4 hours at maximum warp. Are there any other Starfleet vessels in range?" "Negative. The USS Lexington is the closest at 6.2 light-years. We are the only ship capable of responding in time." Kirk's jaw tightened. This was the frontier, vast distances between Federation outposts, limited resources, and the constant reality that help might not arrive in time. "Mr. Sulu, set course for Sigma Draconis 3, maximum warp." "Mr. Chekhov, battle stations." "Aye, Captain." Alarms blared as the Enterprise leaped to warp speed, stars stretching into lines on the view screen. Kirk hit the intercom. "All hands, this is the captain. We are responding to a distress call from a Federation colony under attack. Security teams to armory, medical personnel prepare for casualties." Kirk out. The turbolift doors opened, and Clark entered the bridge, concern evident on his face. "Captain, I heard the alert." "What's happening?" "A colony is under attack. We're 4 hours out." Kirk studied Clark carefully. "Mr. Kent, I may need your help on this one. If the situation is as bad as that transmission suggested, You don't need to ask, Captain. If people are in danger, I'll do whatever I can. McCoy's voice came over the intercom. Jim, if they've got casualties, I'll need to set up triage protocols. How many wounded are we looking at? Unknown, Bones. Prepare for worst-case scenario. Kirk out. He turned to Spock. What do we know about Sigma Draconis 3? The colony was established 7 years ago to mine dilithium and rare earth minerals. Strategic value is moderate, the dilithium deposits are useful but not critical to Federation operations. The colony is located near the border of explored space, which makes it vulnerable to raids from independent operators or hostile forces. Pirates? Kirk asked. Possible. However, the transmission mentioned unknown vessels with capabilities sufficient to disable a planetary defense grid. That suggests organization and resources beyond typical pirate operations. Clark moved closer to the view screen, his expression troubled. Captain, 4 hours is a long time when people are under attack. Is there any way to get there faster? Not without burning out the warp engines. Maximum warp is exactly that, maximum. Kirk could see the frustration in Clark's eyes, the desire to simply fly ahead and help immediately. Mr. Kent, I understand you want to act, but we need to approach this strategically. If you arrive alone, without support, without understanding what you're facing. I could scout ahead, Clark interrupted. My top speed is faster than your warp drive. I could get there in under 2 hours, assess the situation, and report back before you arrive. Spock's eyebrow rose. Mr. Kent, our warp engines propel us at velocities exceeding the speed of light by manipulating spacetime itself. You are suggesting you can move faster through normal space? I don't know if it's the same thing, but yes, I can move extremely fast. Faster than I've ever tested, actually, because I've never had empty space to really push my limits. Clark's eyes were fixed on the view screen, where the colony's coordinates were displayed. Captain, I can help those people right now. Let me go. Kirk weighed the options. Sending Clark ahead was risky. They had no idea what he'd face, no backup if things went wrong, and limited ability to communicate across interstellar distances. But if the attack was ongoing, if people were dying while the Enterprise rushed to the rescue at maximum warp, then speed might save lives. Mr. Spock, can we maintain communication with Mr. Kent across 2.7 light-years? Our subspace communication range is sufficient, though there will be a slight delay. If Mr. Kent carries a communicator, we should be able to maintain contact. Kirk made his decision. Mr. Kent, you're authorized to proceed ahead of the Enterprise. Your mission is reconnaissance only, assess the situation, identify the attackers, locate survivors, but do not engage unless absolutely necessary to prevent loss of life. Is that clear? Crystal clear, Captain. Good. Uhura, give Mr. Kent one of our long-range communicators. Mr. Chekhov, calculate the precise coordinates for Sigma Draconis 3 and transfer them to a navigation beacon Mr. Kent can follow. Aye, Captain. 5 minutes later, Clark stood in the Enterprise's main shuttle bay, holding a Starfleet communicator and wearing a small navigation beacon attached to his belt. Kirk had come down personally to see him off, along with Spock and McCoy. The beacon will transmit the colony's coordinates directly to you, Kirk explained. Just follow the signal. When you arrive, assess the situation and report back immediately. Do not attempt a rescue operation alone unless there's no other choice. Understood. Clark looked at the 3 officers, and Kirk saw genuine appreciation in his eyes. Thank you for trusting me with this. Thank you for being willing to help, Kirk replied. Now go. 4 hours is a long time for people under attack. The shuttle bay doors opened, revealing the star-streaked tunnel of warp space beyond the atmospheric force field. Clark stepped to the edge, took a breath, and launched himself forward. Kirk watched through the observation window as Clark accelerated, his form becoming a blur, then a streak of light that shot ahead of the Enterprise and vanished into the distance. Within seconds, he was gone, moving at speeds that made warp travel look slow. "Fascinating," Spock murmured. "Sensors tracked him accelerating to approximately warp factor 9.7 before he exceeded our detection range. His method of propulsion defies conventional physics." "Everything about him defies conventional physics," McCoy said. "Jim, are you sure about this? Sending him in alone?" "No, Bones, I'm not sure. But I am sure that if there are people dying down there, Clark Kent is our best chance of helping them before it's too late." Kirk turned from the window. "Now let's get to that colony and hope he finds something we can work with." The Enterprise continued at maximum warp, and the bridge settled into tense anticipation. Minutes stretched into an hour, then 90 minutes. Kirk found himself watching the chronometer, calculating distances and speeds, wondering if Clark had made it, if he'd found survivors, if... "Captain." Uhura's voice was sharp with urgency. "I'm receiving a transmission from Mr. Kent's communicator." "On speaker." Clark's voice filled the bridge, and Kirk could hear the strain in it. "Enterprise, this is Kal-El. I've reached Sigma Draconis 3. The situation is worse than we thought. Report, Mr. Kent. The colony is burning. At least 6 structures are completely destroyed, dozens more damaged. I count 3 unknown vessels in orbit, design I don't recognize, but they're heavily armed. They've deployed ground forces, approximately 50 hostiles engaging with colony security." Clark's voice tightened. "Captain, they're not trying to steal anything. They're systematically destroying the colony infrastructure and targeting civilians." Kirk's hands clenched on his command chair. "Casualties?" "Significant. I'm seeing bodies in the streets. Medical facilities are overwhelmed. The attackers are using energy weapons, some kind of directed plasma discharge. Colony defenses are down, and the survivors are trying to evacuate to the mining tunnels. Can you identify the attackers?" There was a pause, and Kirk heard distant weapon fire through the communicator. "They're humanoid, wearing full combat armor. No visible insignia or markings. They're organized, professional. This isn't a random raid. This is deliberate." Spock leaned toward Kirk, speaking quietly. "Captain, this attack profile is consistent with Orion Syndicate operations, specifically, the kind of punitive raids they conduct against colonies that refuse protection payments." "Mr. Kent," Kirk said, "hold position and continue observing. We'll be there in 2 hours and 20 minutes. Do not engage unless—" "Captain, I can't just watch people die." "Mr. Kent. There's a group of civilians pinned down near the main habitat complex. 20, maybe 30 people including children. The attackers are moving to flank them. If I don't do something in the next 2 minutes, those people will be killed." Kirk closed his eyes briefly, the weight of command pressing down. Every instinct screamed to order Clark to wait, to follow protocol, to let the Enterprise handle this when they arrived. But protocol wouldn't save those civilians in the next 2 minutes. "Mr. Kent, you are authorized to intervene. Protect those civilians. But be careful, we don't know what weapons they're using or if they have anything that could hurt you." "Understood. Going in now." The communicator went silent except for the sound of wind rushing past at incredible speed. Then Kirk heard shouts, weapon fire, and Clark's voice cutting through the chaos. "Federation vessel inbound. Cease fire and surrender immediately." More weapon fire, more shouts, this time in a language Kirk didn't recognize. Then a sound like thunder, followed by screams of surprise and fear. "What the hell is that thing? Shoot it! Shoot it!" Energy weapons discharged in rapid succession. Kirk gripped his armrest, listening helplessly as Clark engaged an unknown enemy 2.7 light-years away. Then Clark's voice returned, calm but firm. Your weapons aren't working. Stand down or I'll make you stand down. It's not even hurt. Fall back. Fall back. Captain, Clark said through the communicator, I've secured the civilian position. Hostiles are retreating to their landing craft. The civilians are safe, but, his tone shifted. Captain, there's something wrong here. These attackers, they're terrified. Whatever they expected to find, it wasn't me. Can you identify them? I'm scanning their vessels now. Hull markings are in a script I don't recognize, but, wait. I'm seeing insignia on their armor. It looks like a bird of prey. Kirk and Spock exchanged sharp glances. Romulan? Kirk asked. Possible, Spock said carefully. However, the Romulan Star Empire typically uses cloaking technology for covert operations. Openly attacking a Federation colony would be uncharacteristically bold. Mr. Kent, Kirk said urgently, do not let those vessels escape. We need to identify them, find out who ordered this attack and why. Already on it. The transmission filled with a high-pitched shriek that made everyone on the bridge wince. Uhura quickly adjusted the volume, but the sound continued, a piercing, electronic wail that spoke of massive energy discharge. Mr. Kent. Report. Through the interference, Kirk heard Clark's strained voice. They're firing, some kind of, it's red light, hurts. Red light? McCoy's face went pale. Jim, on his Earth, Superman is vulnerable to red sun radiation. If these attackers somehow know that. Mr. Kent. Kirk was on his feet. Fall back. Get out of there. The shrieking continued for another 5 seconds, then cut off abruptly. The communicator transmitted only static, then silence. Uhura, get that signal back. I'm trying, Captain, but there's too much interference. Kirk turned to the helm. Mr. Sulu, I don't care if we burn out the engines. Get us to that colony now. Maximum warp plus emergency reserves. Aye, sir. The Enterprise shuddered as the warp engines pushed beyond their rated capacity. On the view screen, the warp tunnel intensified, stars blurring into solid streams of light. Spock worked his console frantically. Captain, if the attackers possess technology specifically designed to counteract Mr. Kent's abilities. Then they knew he was coming, Kirk finished grimly. Which means this wasn't a random raid. This was a trap. But how could they know? McCoy demanded. Clark only arrived in our universe a few hours ago. The Klingon knew, Kirk said, his mind racing. Commander Kor knew, which means the Empire knew. And if the Klingon knew, they could have sold that information to the highest bidder. He hit the intercom. Security teams to transporter rooms. Prepare for combat deployment. Medical teams prepare for mass casualties. All hands, battle stations. The klaxons blared as the Enterprise raced toward Sigma Draconis 3 at speeds that made the hull groan and the engines scream. Kirk stood at the center of his bridge, surrounded by the controlled chaos of a crew preparing for battle, and felt the familiar cold clarity of command descend. Someone had attacked a Federation colony. Someone had targeted Clark Kent specifically. Someone had turned a rescue mission into an ambush. And in 93 minutes, the USS Enterprise was going to find out who, and make them answer for it. In the darkness between stars, a man who had survived impossible odds lay somewhere on a burning colony world, wounded by weapons that should not exist in this universe. And Captain James T. Kirk was about to learn that some threats came not from the enemies you could see, but from the shadows that watched and waited for the perfect moment to strike. The Enterprise dropped out of warp like a predator lunging from cover. Sigma Draconis 3 filled the view screen, a rust-colored world with scattered green zones where terraforming had taken hold. Smoke plumes rose from multiple colony sites, visible even from orbit. 3 vessels hung in high orbit, their hulls sleek and predatory, painted in colors that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Visual on the attacking vessels, Sulu reported. Kirk leaned forward, studying the ships with a tactical eye honed by years of combat. They were roughly corvette-sized, smaller than the Enterprise but heavily armed. The design was unfamiliar, angular, aggressive, with weapon ports that glowed with residual energy discharge. Mr. Spock, identification? The Vulcan's fingers danced across his console, and Kirk could see his first officer's expression shift from concentration to concern. Captain, the vessels do not match any known configuration in our database. However, the hull composition and energy signatures are consistent with Orion Syndicate construction techniques. The bird of prey insignia Mr. Kent observed is not Romulan, it appears to be a mercenary company marking. Mercenaries hired to attack a Federation colony, Kirk said grimly. Someone's trying to provoke a response. Mr. Chekhov, weapon status? Phasers charged and ready, Captain. Photon torpedoes loaded. Hail them. Uhura worked her console, then shook her head. No response, Captain. They're powering weapons. Red alert. Shields up. Mr. Sulu, evasive pattern Delta 2. The 3 mercenary vessels broke formation, accelerating toward the Enterprise with clear hostile intent. Their weapons ports flared, and emerald bolts of plasma energy streaked across the void. Incoming fire. The Enterprise shuddered as plasma impacts hammered against the shields. Kirk gripped his armrest, watching the shield status displays. Return fire. Phasers, surgical strikes, disable their weapons, don't destroy them. I want prisoners. The Enterprise's phaser arrays lit up space with coherent energy beams, precisely targeted strikes that sliced across the mercenary vessel's hulls. One ship's weapon array exploded in a shower of sparks and venting atmosphere. Another vessel's engines flickered and died, leaving it drifting. The third vessel, however, proved more maneuverable. It dove beneath the Enterprise's saucer section, firing as it went. The bridge lights flickered as shields absorbed the impact. Shields holding at 87%, Chekhov reported. That last vessel has superior maneuverability. Then let's remove that advantage. Mr. Sulu, bring us about. Chekhov, target their engine nacelles with photon torpedoes. Torpedoes away. 2 brilliant points of light streaked toward the mercenary vessel, impacting with precise force against its sublight drives. The ship lurched, spinning out of control as its engines failed catastrophically. All 3 vessels disabled, Captain, Spock reported. They are attempting to send a distress signal on encrypted channels. Jam it. I don't want whoever hired them knowing we've arrived. Kirk stood, moving toward the view screen. Uhura, try to raise Mr. Kent on his communicator. Aye, Captain. There was a long pause filled with static. I'm getting a weak signal. Routing it through. The communicator crackled, and Clark's voice came through, strained, pained, but alive. Enterprise, still here, barely. Relief flooded through Kirk, though he kept his voice controlled. Mr. Kent, report your status. They hit me with some kind of red radiation beam. Felt like being drained from the inside. I'm down but recovering. Yellow sun radiation is helping. There was a pause punctuated by labored breathing. Captain, they were ready for me. They knew exactly what would hurt me. How is that possible? That's what we're going to find out. Can you move? Getting there. Give me 5 minutes, and I'll be functional. Take the time you need. We've neutralized the attacking vessels. Ground forces? Still active. They're regrouping near their landing craft. I counted 3 shuttles, fully armed squads. They know you're here now, they're preparing to evacuate. Kirk turned to his crew. Mr. Spock, organize security teams for planetary deployment. Priority 1, rescue survivors and provide medical assistance. Priority 2, capture hostile forces for interrogation. I want to know who hired them and how they knew about Mr. Kent's vulnerability. Understood, Captain. Dr. McCoy, prepare sickbay for mass casualties. Coordinate with the colony's medical facilities if they're still operational. McCoy's voice came through the intercom. Already on it, Jim. I'm assembling trauma teams now. Kirk hit another control. Transporter room, prepare to beam down security detachments on my command. Scotty, I need you on the bridge. Aye, Captain, on my way. The next 10 minutes were controlled chaos as the Enterprise transformed from warship to rescue vessel. Security teams assembled in transporter rooms, armed and armored. Medical personnel prepped emergency supplies. Damage control teams prepared engineering equipment to help restore colony infrastructure. Montgomery Scott emerged from the turbolift, his Scottish accent thick with concern. Captain, I've been monitoring those mercenary vessels. They're packing some unusual hardware, weapon systems that don't match standard Orion technology. Explain. The red radiation beam they used against Mr. Kent, that's not something you cobble together from black market parts. That's custom engineering, specifically designed to emit wavelengths that would weaken someone whose biology depends on solar energy absorption. Someone did their homework. Kirk felt the pieces falling into place, a picture emerging from fragments of information. Someone who knew Clark was coming. Someone who knew his weaknesses. Someone who wanted to test him in combat and see if he could be killed. Or captured, Spock added from his station. Captain, I have been analyzing the attack pattern. The initial assault on the colony was designed to generate a distress call that would reach us. The timing suggests they calculated when we would arrive, when Mr. Kent would likely arrive ahead of us, and positioned their forces accordingly. They used an entire colony as bait, Kirk said, anger creeping into his voice. Killed innocent people just to set a trap. Affirmative. The question remains, who possesses both the intelligence resources to learn about Mr. Kent and the ruthlessness to orchestrate such an attack? Romulans, Kirk said immediately. They've been monitoring Federation space, gathering intelligence. Commander Corps' encounter with Clark would have been detected by their listening posts. They could have pieced together enough information to realize what Clark was and how to counter him. But why attack now? Scotty asked. If the Romulans wanted to test Mr. Kent, why not wait until they had him isolated? Because they're not trying to capture him, Kirk realized. They're trying to create an incident. Attack a Federation colony, force us to respond, and when Clark intervenes, prove that we're harboring a weapon of mass destruction. It gives them justification for military action or political pressure. Uhura interrupted. Captain, I'm receiving a transmission from the colony surface. Administrator Chen is alive and requesting immediate assistance. They've got hundreds wounded and their main medical facility is destroyed. Tell her help is on the way. Mr. Spock, begin transport operations. Medical teams first, then security. I'm going down with the first wave. Captain, Spock said carefully, regulations require the commanding officer to remain. I know the regulations, Mr. Spock. You have the con. If those mercenary vessels try anything, disable their life support and prepare to take survivors prisoner. Kirk moved toward the turbolift. Scotty, with me. I want your eyes on their technology. The transporter room hummed with activity as Kirk and Scott joined the first security team. Lieutenant Commander Giotto, head of security, stood ready with 12 armed personnel, all wearing environmental suits equipped with medical supplies and combat gear. Coordinates locked, Captain, the transporter chief reported. Beaming directly to the colony's central plaza. Energize. The familiar tingle of molecular disassembly washed over Kirk, and the transporter room dissolved into sparkling light. When reality reassembled, he stood in hell. The colony's central plaza was a war zone. Buildings burned, their structural supports twisted and melted by plasma weapons. Bodies lay in the streets, colonists who'd been caught in the open when the attack began. Wounded survivors huddled in makeshift shelters, tended by overwhelmed medical personnel. The air reeked of burning plastic, ozone, and death. Administrator Chen emerged from the command center, a woman in her 40s, her face streaked with ash and blood, her eyes hollow with shock. "Captain Kirk. Thank God you're here. How many casualties?" 237 dead. 400 wounded, many critical. They targeted the medical center first, then the power distribution facility. We've been running on emergency generators for the past 3 hours. Her voice cracked. They weren't trying to rob us, Captain. They were trying to kill us. Kirk put a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. We're here now. Medical teams are beaming down with supplies and personnel. Where are your people concentrated? Mining tunnels, subsection 7. We evacuated everyone we could when the attack started. She looked toward the burning buildings. But there are still people trapped in the residential sectors. We've been hearing their distress calls but couldn't reach them through the fires. We'll find them. Kirk turned to Giotto. Organize search and rescue teams. Priority zones are residential sectors and medical facilities. If you encounter hostile forces, you are authorized to use necessary force to protect civilians. Aye, sir. As Giotto's teams dispersed, Kirk spotted a figure moving through the smoke, Clark Kent, walking slowly, one hand pressed against his chest. His uniform was scorched, and Kirk could see burn marks on his exposed skin that were already healing, fading as yellow sunlight filtered through the smoke. "Mr. Kent," Kirk called out, moving to intercept him. "You should be resting. Can't rest while people are still in danger." Clark's voice was stronger now, though Kirk could see the lingering pain in his eyes. "That weapon they used, it was specifically designed to hurt me. Red solar radiation tuned to exactly the wavelength that disrupts Kryptonian cellular function. Someone studied me, Captain. Someone knows what I am. We're working on finding out who. Right now, I need your help with search and rescue. Can you use your enhanced senses to locate survivors in collapsed structures?" Clark nodded, closing his eyes in concentration. "I can hear them. 17 people trapped in the eastern residential block, 3 stories down. The building's structural integrity is compromised. If we use conventional rescue equipment, the whole thing might collapse. Can you stabilize it?" "I can try." Clark moved toward the damaged building, and Kirk followed with Scotty close behind. The eastern residential block was a nightmare of twisted metal and shattered transparent aluminum. Fires burned in multiple sections, and the entire structure listed dangerously to one side. Kirk could hear faint cries for help from somewhere deep inside the wreckage. Clark placed both hands against a support beam, testing its strength. "The main structural columns are failing. If I remove the debris from above, the weight shift will bring down the entire building." "What if you held it up?" Kirk asked. "Used your strength to support the structure while we evacuate the survivors?" Clark studied the building, calculating stresses and load-bearing points. "It would work, but I'd need to be in 2 places at once. Someone needs to go inside and guide the survivors out while I hold the weight." "I'll go," Kirk said immediately. "Captain," Scotty began. "That's an order, Mr. Scott. You stay here and coordinate with Mr. Kent. Work out the engineering logistics." Kirk didn't wait for further argument. He grabbed a portable beacon and a communicator, then moved toward the building's partially collapsed entrance. Behind him, he heard Clark begin to lift, a grinding sound of metal on metal as superhuman strength began supporting tons of wreckage. Inside the building was darkness punctuated by emergency lighting and small fires. Kirk activated his beacon, casting harsh white light across the devastation. "This is Captain Kirk of the USS Enterprise. Can anyone hear me? Here. We're here." Voices, desperate and afraid, came from somewhere below. Kirk found a stairwell, partially intact, dangerously unstable, and began descending. The building groaned around him, and he could hear Clark's voice through his communicator. "Captain, I've got the main weight supported, but there are secondary collapses happening throughout the structure. You need to hurry." "Understood." 2 levels down, Kirk found them, a group of colonists huddled in what had been a communal living area. 17 people, ranging from elderly to children, all terrified and injured but alive. A young woman stepped forward, clearly the group leader. "Are you real?" "We thought." "I'm real, and we're getting you out." "Can everyone move?" "Most of us. Mr. Hayashi has a broken leg, and Mrs. Patterson is badly burned." Kirk activated his communicator. "Enterprise, this is Kirk. Lock onto my signal and prepare to transport 17 people directly to sickbay. Medical emergencies, 1 broken leg, 1 burn victim, multiple minor injuries." "Acknowledged, Captain," came the transporter chief's voice. "Locking on now." The colonists began to shimmer, dissolving into the transporter effect. Kirk felt profound relief as they vanished, 17 lives saved from. The building lurched violently. Somewhere above, a support beam gave way with a shriek of tortured metal. "Captain." Clark's voice was strained. "The eastern wall just failed. I can hold it, but you need to get out now." Kirk ran for the stairwell as the building began its final collapse. Walls buckled, ceiling tiles rained down, and the floor beneath his feet tilted at a sickening angle. He grabbed the stairwell railing and pulled himself upward as the structure disintegrated around him. Behind him, something massive crashed down, the sound of total structural failure. Kirk emerged into daylight just as the entire eastern section of the building imploded, falling inward on itself in a cloud of dust and debris. Through the dust, Kirk saw Clark, standing at the edge of the collapse zone, arms still raised, holding up a section of wall that must have weighed hundreds of tons. The Kryptonian's face was strained, muscles trembling with effort, but he held steady until the dust settled and it was clear no one else was inside. Then, slowly, carefully, Clark lowered the massive wall section to the ground. It settled with a ground-shaking impact, and Clark staggered backward, breathing hard. "Everyone out?" he asked. Kirk nodded, catching his breath. "Everyone. Good work, Mr. Kent." "Just doing what anyone would do." "Not anyone," Kirk said quietly. "Only you." Around them, the rescue operation continued. Enterprise personnel worked alongside colonists, pulling survivors from wreckage, treating wounds, restoring basic services. The mercenary ground forces had withdrawn to their landing craft under the watchful eyes of Starfleet security teams, effectively trapped between armed guards and disabled escape vessels. But as Kirk surveyed the devastation, one truth crystallized with absolute clarity: this attack had been planned with surgical precision. Someone had known Clark would respond to a distress call. Someone had weapons specifically designed to hurt him. Someone had been willing to sacrifice hundreds of innocent lives to test whether the being called Kal-El could be killed. And somewhere in the shadows, that someone was watching, evaluating, planning their next move. The Enterprise had won this battle. But Kirk had the growing certainty that the war had only just begun. The interrogation room aboard the Enterprise was designed to be deliberately uncomfortable: bare walls, harsh lighting, a simple table bolted to the floor. Kirk sat across from the mercenary commander, a Iridian named Corvix whose reptilian features remained impassive despite 6 hours of questioning. Spock stood in the corner, tricorder recording every word, every micro-expression. "Let's try this again," Kirk said, keeping his voice level. "Who hired you to attack Sigma Draconis 3? Corvix's lipless mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "I have already told you, Captain. We received an anonymous contract through encrypted channels. Payment in latinum, delivered to a neutral drop point. We never meet our employers, that is standard practice in my profession. Your profession being murder for hire. I prefer military contractor. But yes, essentially. Kirk leaned forward, his patience wearing thin. 237 people died in that attack. Civilians. Families. Children. And you're sitting here telling me you don't know who paid you to kill them? I know what you want me to say, Captain. You want me to confess that the Romulan Star Empire hired us, or perhaps the Klingon, or some other convenient enemy that would justify your response. Korvax's eyes glittered with intelligence. But I do not know. And even if I did, what makes you think I would tell you? My reputation depends on discretion. If I reveal my clients, I will never work again, assuming I survive long enough to be released from your custody. Spock spoke up from his corner. Your vessel's computer core contained fragments of the original contract transmission. Our analysis indicates the message originated from a relay station in the triangular system, a known Romulan intelligence hub. Then you have your answer. Why do you need my confirmation? Because, Kirk said carefully, the weapon you used against Mr. Kent was not Romulan technology. It was specifically engineered to emit red solar radiation at precise wavelengths that disrupt Kryptonian cellular function. That level of detailed biological knowledge requires more than remote observation. Someone studied him extensively, understood his physiology, and custom-built a weapon to exploit his weakness. That suggests intelligence gathering far beyond what the Romulans could have accomplished in a few hours. Korvax's expression shifted slightly, not fear, but calculation. The weapon was provided by our employer. Delivered to us with specific instructions on when and how to use it. We were told to expect an individual with extraordinary abilities responding ahead of your vessel. We were told this individual could survive in vacuum, possessed great strength, and was vulnerable to specific radiation wavelengths. He paused. We were not told why someone would want such a being tested in combat. We were simply told to do so. Tested, Kirk repeated. Not killed? The contract specified incapacitation, not termination. We were to demonstrate the weapon's effectiveness and report results through encrypted channels. Korvax's smile returned. Which we did, before you so inconveniently interrupted our data transmission. Kirk exchanged glances with Spock. So whoever hired you now knows that their weapon works. They know Clark can be hurt. Indeed, Captain. And they paid us quite handsomely for that information. Kirk stood abruptly, fury barely controlled. You killed hundreds of people just to test a weapon? I killed hundreds of people because I was paid to create a situation that would draw your vessel, and more specifically, your guest, into a combat scenario. The civilian casualties were, from a tactical perspective, acceptable losses to achieve mission objectives. Korvax leaned back in his chair. Do not look at me with such moral superiority, Captain. Your Federation has made similar calculations countless times. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, is that not one of your guiding principles? That principle applies when making impossible choices to save lives, Kirk said coldly. Not when murdering innocents for profit. A distinction without difference from my perspective. Kirk wanted to continue, wanted to force answers from this creature who spoke of mass murder with casual indifference. But he knew interrogation had limits, especially when the subject was a professional who understood exactly what information to withhold. Mr. Spock, escort our guest back to the brig. Make sure he's comfortable. Kirk's tone made clear that comfort was the last thing on his mind. As security guards led Korvax away, Kirk remained in the interrogation room, staring at the empty chair. Spock returned moments later, his expression thoughtful. Your assessment, Mr. Spock. Korvax is telling the truth, or at least, a carefully curated version of it. He was hired to test Mr. Kent's capabilities and report the results. The Romulan connection is plausible but not confirmed. The weapon's sophistication suggests significant resources and advanced scientific knowledge. Spock paused. However, I believe we are missing a critical element of this puzzle. Which is motivation. The Romulans are strategic thinkers, Captain. If they wanted to assess Mr. Kent as a potential threat, there are less overt methods available to them. Attacking a Federation colony risks open war, something the Empire has been carefully avoiding since our last major conflict. This attack was deliberately provocative, designed to create maximum political tension. Kirk nodded slowly. Someone wants us to blame the Romulans. They want us to respond aggressively, maybe even start a war. Or, Spock suggested, someone wants to provoke multiple responses simultaneously. The Klingon know about Mr. Kent. The Romulans now have detailed intelligence on his capabilities and vulnerabilities. Various intelligence services throughout the quadrant are undoubtedly taking notice. Mr. Kent has become, inadvertently, a catalyst for destabilization. The door chimed, and McCoy entered without waiting for permission. His face was grave. "Jim, I need to talk to you about Clark." "What's wrong?" "I've been analyzing the medical data from his encounter with that radiation weapon. The damage was extensive. Cellular disruption at the molecular level, energy depletion that would have killed any normal humanoid instantly. He's recovering, but it's taking longer than I'd expected. His body is adapting, yes, but that weapon hurt him in ways that won't just heal overnight." Kirk felt a chill. "How long until he's at full capacity?" "Unknown. Days, maybe weeks. And that's assuming he doesn't encounter that radiation again. Jim, if they've got one of those weapons, they can build more. They can reverse engineer it, improve it, mass-produce it." McCoy's southern drawl thickened with concern. "They've figured out how to kill Superman. And now that knowledge is out there." The intercom whistled. "Bridge to Captain Kirk." Kirk moved to the wall panel. "Kirk here. Captain, we're receiving a Priority 1 transmission from Starfleet Command. Admiral Comac is requesting immediate secure communication. Route it to my ready room." "I'm on my way." Kirk looked at Spock and McCoy. "Gentlemen, I suspect this conversation is about to get complicated." The ready room was a small private office adjacent to the bridge where Kirk handled administrative duties and sensitive communications. He activated the secure channel, and Admiral Comac's stern face appeared on the view screen. "Captain Kirk. I've received preliminary reports about the attack on Sigma Draconis 3. 237 dead, a Federation colony in ruins, and 3 mercenary vessels in your custody. Tell me this situation is contained." "I wish I could, Admiral. We've neutralized the immediate threat, but the attack was specifically designed to test Mr. Kent's capabilities and identify his weaknesses. Someone went to considerable effort to learn what could hurt him and built weapons accordingly." Comac's expression darkened. "And you're certain this wasn't simply a pirate raid that happened to coincide with your guest's presence?" "Completely certain. The mercenaries were given detailed intelligence about Clark, including specific instructions on how to incapacitate him. They were hired to create a situation that would draw him into combat so the weapon's effectiveness could be evaluated." "Who hired them?" "Unknown. The contract was anonymous, but evidence suggests Romulan involvement. However, Mr. Spock believes this may be deliberate misdirection, an attempt to provoke conflict between the Federation and the Empire." Comac was silent for a long moment. "Captain, the Federation Council has been briefed on your guest's existence. There are significant concerns about harboring an individual of such power, especially one whose presence appears to be attracting hostile attention. Several council members are suggesting that Mr. Kent represents more of a liability than an asset." Kirk felt his jaw tighten. "With respect, Admiral, Clark Kent saved dozens of lives today. Without his intervention, casualty numbers would have been far higher. I don't dispute his heroism, Captain. But consider the broader picture. His mere presence in our universe has drawn the attention of the Klingon, possibly the Romulans, and who knows what other powers. Intelligence services throughout the quadrant are now aware that we have access to a being who can survive in vacuum, move faster than warp speed, and project lethal energy. That makes him, and by extension, the Federation, a target. So what are you suggesting, Admiral? That we abandon him? Refuse to help him return home? I'm suggesting that you follow your original orders and bring him to Starbase 12 for evaluation. Starfleet science needs to study the probe fragments, assess the possibility of returning him to his universe, and determine whether that's even advisable at this point. We may have inadvertently stumbled into a situation with galaxy-wide implications. Kirk took a breath, choosing his words carefully. Admiral, I gave Mr. Kent my word that we would help him. He's done nothing to violate that trust. If we treat him like a strategic asset to be studied and contained, we're no better than whoever built that weapon to hurt him. Captain, your personal feelings about honor and trust are admirable, but this is bigger than one man, even one extraordinary man. The Federation has protocols for dealing with powerful entities, and those protocols exist for good reason. You will proceed to Starbase 12. That's an order. The screen went dark before Kirk could respond. He sat in silence for a moment, staring at the blank viewscreen, feeling the weight of command pressing down. He believed in the chain of command, believed in following orders even when he disagreed with them. But he also believed in keeping his word, in protecting those under his care, in choosing what was right over what was expedient. The door chimed. Come. Clark entered, and Kirk could see the man looked better. The burns had healed completely, his movements were fluid again, though there was still weariness in his eyes. Captain, I heard we're being ordered to Starbase 12. The crew is talking. News travels fast on a starship. Kirk gestured to a chair. Have a seat, Mr. Kent. Clark sat, his expression troubled. I'm causing problems for you. For your crew. For the Federation. Maybe it would be better if I just left, flew off on my own, tried to find a way home without dragging you into this mess. And go where? Mr. Kent, you're in an unfamiliar universe with unknown dangers and enemies who've already demonstrated they can hurt you. Flying off alone isn't courage, it's suicide. Maybe. But at least I wouldn't be putting 430 people at risk just by being here. Kirk leaned forward, his voice firm. Listen to me. You didn't ask to come here. You didn't want this situation any more than we did. But you're here, and you've conducted yourself with honor and courage. You saved lives today. You put yourself in danger to protect people you'd never met, on a world you'd never heard of, in a universe that isn't yours. That counts for something. Does it count enough to justify the political firestorm I'm causing? Political firestorms come and go. Principles last forever. Kirk stood, moving to the viewport where stars streaked past in warp transit. My father used to tell me that the true measure of a person isn't what they do when it's easy, it's what they do when every choice is hard, when every path leads somewhere difficult. You've proven your measure, Mr. Kent. Now it's time for the Federation to prove ours. What does that mean? Kirk turned from the viewport, decision crystallizing. It means we're going to Starbase 12 as ordered. We're going to let Starfleet science analyze the probe fragments and determine if we can send you home. But we're going to do it on our terms. You're not a specimen to be studied or a weapon to be contained. You're a person seeking help, and I'll be damned if I let bureaucrats and admirals forget that. Clark stood, and Kirk saw gratitude mixed with concern in his expression. Captain, I don't want you risking your career for me. I've risked my career for less important things. Besides, Kirk allowed himself a slight smile. I've got a reputation for insubordination that I need to maintain. The Admiralty gets nervous when I start following orders too precisely. A ghost of a smile crossed Clark's face. On my Earth, I work with people who bend the rules when it matters. I guess some things really are universal. The intercom whistled. Captain Kirk to the bridge. Kirk and Clark emerged from the ready room to find Spock standing at his station with an expression that, for a Vulcan, registered as deeply concerned. Report, Mr. Spock. Captain, long-range sensors have detected 3 Romulan warbuds decloaking on the edge of the neutral zone. They are maintaining position but have powered weapons and shields. Additionally, we are receiving a transmission on diplomatic channels from a vessel identifying itself as the IRW Valdor. The commander wishes to speak with you. Kirk felt the pieces falling into place with terrible clarity. The attack on the colony, the weapon designed to hurt Clark, the convenient evidence pointing toward Romulan involvement, it had all been building to this moment. On screen. The view screen shimmered, and Kirk found himself facing a Romulan commander he'd never seen before, a woman with sharp features, calculating eyes, and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Her uniform bore markings Kirk didn't recognize, suggesting an intelligence service rather than the regular Romulan fleet. Captain Kirk, she said, her voice cool and precise. I am Commander Karas of Romulan Naval Intelligence. We need to discuss the individual aboard your vessel, the one your crew refers to as Kal-El. Kirk kept his expression neutral. I'm not in the habit of discussing my crew with foreign powers. Then perhaps we should discuss why that individual was responsible for the attack on your colony. Karas's smile was predatory. You see, Captain, we've been monitoring Federation communications. We know about the weapon used against him, a weapon built using technology stolen from Romulan research facilities 3 months ago. We know about the mercenaries, hired through channels that trace back to a rogue Federation intelligence operative. And we know that your guest is not what he appears to be. Explain. We believe Kal-El is a Klingon bioweapon, a genetically engineered soldier designed to destabilize Federation-Romulan relations and provide the Empire with a pretext for invasion. The attack on your colony was a field test. And you, Captain Kirk, are harboring the very weapon that may start the next Great War. Kirk felt the trap closing, a web of lies and misdirection so carefully constructed that it almost seemed plausible. Almost. That's an interesting theory, Commander. One problem, it's complete fiction. Karas's expression didn't change. Then you won't mind if we board your vessel and verify his origins? Surely if he's innocent, you have nothing to hide. I mind very much. This vessel is Federation territory. You have no jurisdiction here. We have every jurisdiction when it concerns threats to the neutral zone's stability. Stand down your shields and prepare to be boarded, Captain Kirk. Or we will interpret your refusal as an act of war. The 3 Romulan warbuds moved forward, weapons hot, ready for battle. And Kirk realized that the trap hadn't been set for Clark alone, it had been set for the entire Enterprise, designed to force an impossible choice: surrender to Romulan demands or start a war that could engulf the quadrant. In the command chair, with 430 lives depending on his next words, Captain James T. Kirk had seconds to decide which impossible option would hurt fewer people. Kirk's mind raced through options, calculating odds, weighing consequences. 3 Romulan warbuds against the Enterprise, possible to win, but at devastating cost. Surrender Clark to Romulan custody, unthinkable. Start a war based on fabricated accusations, exactly what whoever orchestrated this wanted. Commander Karas, Kirk said carefully, I don't know what intelligence you've been fed, but I can assure you that Mr. Kal-El is not a Klingon bioweapon. We have extensive medical analysis proving his extraterrestrial origin from a completely different dimensional framework. Medical analysis can be falsified, Karas replied. We require independent verification. Stand down your shields. Clark stepped forward, his voice carrying across the bridge. Commander, I'll submit to your examination willingly. If it will prevent bloodshed, I'll go with you and prove I'm not what you think I am. Mr. Kent, Kirk began, but Clark cut him off. Captain, she's right about one thing. As long as there's doubt about what I am, people will use me as an excuse for conflict. Let me go with them. Let them run their tests. When they realize I'm telling the truth, this situation resolves itself. Or, Spock interjected quietly, they conduct their examination in a facility equipped with red solar radiation, effectively neutralizing your abilities and making you a prisoner indefinitely. Kara's smile widened fractionally. Your Vulcan officer is perceptive. Yes, Captain Kirk, we would conduct the examination under conditions that ensure our safety. Given what we witnessed at Sigma Draconis 3, I'm sure you understand the necessity. Kirk's jaw tightened. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, a carefully orchestrated scenario designed to force an outcome that benefited someone else's agenda. But whose? Captain, Uhura said urgently, I'm detecting multiple subspace transmissions from the Romulan vessels. They're reporting our position and status to, she paused, her expression shocked. Sir, they're transmitting to a Klingon battle group approximately 2 light-years away. Klingon? Kirk turned to Spock. Confirmation? Affirmative. Sensors detect 4 Klingon vessels on approach vector. Estimated arrival time, Spock's eyebrow rose. 12 minutes. They were waiting nearby, Captain. This entire situation has been coordinated. The pieces fell into place with crystalline clarity. The Romulans hadn't orchestrated this alone. They'd partnered with Klingon hardliners, both sides working together toward a common goal, destabilizing the Federation by creating a crisis neither side could back down from. Kirk turned to Karas. Who are you really working for, Commander? Because this stopped being about Federation-Romulan relations the moment you called in the Klingon. For the first time, Karas's expression shifted, not surprise, but recognition that her plan had been exposed. Very astute, Captain. Perhaps I should explain the actual situation rather than the convenient fiction. Please do. 6 months ago, elements within the Romulan Senate and the Klingon High Council reached an understanding. Your Federation has grown too powerful, too confident in your philosophy of peaceful expansion. You spread across the galaxy claiming to bring enlightenment and cooperation, but what you really bring is cultural erosion, the slow death of warrior societies, the replacement of honor with bureaucracy. Karas's voice carried conviction now, true belief beneath the calculated exterior. We decided that something must be done to halt your expansion. But open war would be costly for all parties. So you created a crisis, Kirk said. Found a being powerful enough to frighten both your governments, manufactured evidence that we're developing him as a weapon, and orchestrated a situation where we'd be forced to either surrender him or fight. Precisely. With one additional element, when the Klingon arrive, they will demand custody of Kal-El as well. The Federation will face impossible choices, give him to us, give him to them, or refuse both and face combined assault. No matter which option you choose, the political fallout will cripple your government's credibility and give us the breathing room we need to rebuild our military capabilities. Clark's hands clenched into fists. You're gambling with billions of lives just to buy time for your arms race? We're ensuring our civilization's survival against an existential threat, your Federation's infectious idealism. Karas looked directly at Clark. You, Kal-El, are simply a convenient catalyst. Your abilities, your vulnerabilities, your very existence in our universe, all of it serves a purpose larger than one individual. Except, Spock said from his station, your plan contains a fundamental flaw. Oh? Do enlighten me, Vulcan. You assume Captain Kirk will choose one of your predetermined options. However, you have failed to account for his tendency toward creative problem-solving in no-win scenarios. Karas's expression hardened. There is no creative solution here. You are outnumbered, outgunned, and politically isolated. In 9 minutes, the Klingon arrive. You will surrender Kal-El to Romulan or Klingon custody, or you will die fighting both empires simultaneously. Those are your only options. Kirk felt the familiar cold clarity descend, the mental state where impossible situations revealed unexpected angles. He looked at Clark, then at his crew, then back at the view screen where 3 Romulan warbuds waited like predators. "Mr. Spock, you said the Romulans and Klingon were transmitting on subspace channels?" "Affirmative." "Are those transmissions encrypted?" "Heavily." However, Spock's fingers moved across his console. "I am detecting a secondary channel, less secure, used for tactical coordination between their forces." "Can you decrypt it?" "Given sufficient time, yes." "You have 8 minutes. Kara's laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "What do you hope to accomplish, Captain? Even if you intercept our communications, it changes nothing." "Maybe not. Or maybe it gives me leverage." Kirk turned to Uhura. "Lieutenant, open a channel to Starfleet Command. Priority 1, full encryption. I want Admiral Comac and anyone else in command who can make decisions in real time." "Aye, sir." Channel opening. Kirk looked at Clark. "Mr. Kent, I need you to trust me. What I'm about to do is going to seem like I'm sacrificing you to save my ship. I need you to play along." Clark's eyes narrowed, but he nodded. "I trust you, Captain." "Good. Because we're about to gamble everything on a bluff." Admiral Comac's face appeared on a secondary screen, his expression grave. "Captain Kirk, we've been monitoring your situation. You are authorized to defend yourself, but I remind you that engaging both Romulan and Klingon forces simultaneously would be suicide." "Yes, Admiral, I'm aware. That's why I'm not going to fight them." Kirk took a breath. "I'm going to give them what they want." The bridge fell silent. Even Spock looked up from his station, one eyebrow raised. "Explain yourself, Captain," Comac said carefully. "Commander Karras has made it clear that this entire situation is designed to force an impossible choice. So I'm going to remove choice from the equation. Mr. Kal-El will be transferred to Romulan custody for examination and verification of his origins." Kirk kept his voice level, professional, as if discussing routine cargo transfer rather than surrendering a living being. Clark's expression remained neutral, but Kirk saw the trust in his eyes, the faith that this was part of a larger plan. Karras smiled triumphantly. "A wise decision, Captain. Lower your shields and prepare to transfer." Under the following conditions, Kirk continued. "The examination will be conducted aboard Starbase 12 under Joint Federation Romulan supervision. Medical personnel from both governments will be present. All findings will be shared simultaneously with the Federation Council, the Romulan Senate, and, when they arrive, the Klingon High Council. Complete transparency, observed by all parties." The smile vanished from Karras's face. "That is not acceptable. We require custody." "Those are my terms, Commander." "You want to verify that Mr. Kal-El isn't a Federation weapon? Fine. Let's verify it in front of everyone. Let's make this entire situation so public, so thoroughly documented, that no one can claim conspiracy or cover-up." Kirk leaned forward. "Unless, of course, you're not actually interested in verification. Unless this whole thing is about creating conflict rather than preventing it." Karras's expression went cold. "You're stalling. I'm offering you exactly what you claim to want, independent verification. The fact that you're refusing suggests your real goals are something else entirely." "Captain," Spock said quietly, "I have successfully decrypted the tactical coordination channel. You should see this immediately." Kirk glanced at a monitor showing decoded Romulan-Klingon communications. His eyes widened as he read the messages: orders to ensure the Enterprise was destroyed in the confrontation, references to planned attacks on other Federation outposts, strategic coordination for a joint invasion to begin immediately after the Enterprise's destruction. "Well," Kirk said softly. "That's interesting. Mr. Spock, are you recording this?" Affirmative. Transmit it. Starfleet Command, Romulan Senate, Klingon High Council, everyone gets a copy. Let's see how the political leadership of both empires reacts when they discover their intelligence services have been planning unauthorized military action. Kara's face went pale. You wouldn't dare. That's classified military intelligence. That proves your entire operation was designed to start a war, not prevent one. That shows elements within both your governments conspiring to undermine peace treaties and launch unprovoked attacks. Kirk's voice hardened. You want to talk about threats to stability, Commander? You're looking at one. The decoded transmissions went out simultaneously on all channels. Kirk watched Kara's expression as she realized what had just happened, her entire conspiracy exposed to the very governments she'd been manipulating. Captain Kirk, Admiral Comac said from the command screen, I'm receiving confirmation from Federation intelligence. The Romulan Senate is already moving to recall Commander Kara's. The Klingon High Council is, he paused, apparently executing the officers who authorized this operation without council approval. Klingon efficiency, Kirk observed. Commander Kara's, it appears your support structure has just collapsed. I suggest you withdraw your vessels and return to Romulan space before your own government decides you're too much of a liability. Kara stared at Kirk with pure hatred. You've interfered in matters beyond your understanding, Kirk. There are forces at work that transcend simple politics. Like Section 31? Kirk asked, taking a calculated risk. The flash of recognition in Kara's eyes confirmed his suspicion. This hadn't been just a Romulan-Klingon conspiracy. There was another layer, another player manipulating events from the shadows. Before Kara's could respond, her view screen flickered and was replaced by another Romulan officer, an older man with an admiral's insignia. Commander Kara's, you are hereby relieved of command and ordered to return to Romulus immediately to face charges of unauthorized military action and conspiracy to commit acts of war. Your crew will comply or be considered mutineers. The transmission ended. Kara's image disappeared, replaced by the view of 3 Romulan warbuds powering down weapons and beginning to turn away. Captain, Chekhov reported, the Klingon vessels are also withdrawing. They're transmitting apologies for what they're calling an unauthorized intelligence operation. Kirk allowed himself to breathe. The immediate crisis was over, but the implications rippled outward like shock waves. Section 31, Starfleet's own Shadow Intelligence Service, had been involved in a conspiracy to start a war. The question was why. Clark moved to stand beside Kirk's chair. You did it. You found a way out. I found a way to delay. The real threat is still out there, whoever's been coordinating this from the beginning. Whoever built that weapon to hurt you. Whoever decided you were valuable enough to risk interstellar war. Captain Kirk, Admiral Comac said, proceed to Starbase 12 as ordered. We need to debrief everyone involved and sort through this mess. And Kirk, the Admiral's expression was grudging respect. Well done. You've bought us time to figure out what's really going on. Thank you, Admiral. Kirk out. As the bridge crew began securing from battle stations, Spock approached Kirk's chair. Captain, a fascinating tactical demonstration. However, I am concerned about the Section 31 involvement. If they were willing to risk war to achieve their objectives regarding Mr. Kent, then they'll try again, Kirk finished. Different method, different approach, but the same goal. Whatever they want with Clark, they're not going to give up just because we exposed one conspiracy. Agreed. I recommend increased security protocols and... The lights flickered. Every system on the bridge went dark for a fraction of a second, then returned. But in that moment of darkness, Kirk felt something change, a presence, a shift in reality itself. When the lights returned, there was a man standing in the center of the bridge who hadn't been there before. He wore what appeared to be a Starfleet admiral's uniform, but something about him was wrong, too perfect, too controlled, as if he were wearing humanity rather than being human. His eyes were ancient despite his middle-aged appearance, and when he smiled, Kirk felt a chill run down his spine. "Fascinating," the man said, his voice carrying harmonics that shouldn't exist. "You've just dismantled 6 months of careful planning with one clever transmission. I must say, Captain Kirk, you continue to exceed expectations." Security guards raised their phasers, but the man didn't seem concerned. "Who are you?" Kirk demanded. "I'm known by many names, Captain. In your organization, I'm called Control. In the broader universe, I'm simply an interested observer ensuring that certain variables remain controlled." The man's smile widened. "And you, Mr. Kal-El, are a very significant variable." Clark stepped forward, his eyes beginning to glow red. "You built the weapon that hurt me. I provided specifications based on analysis of your physiology, yes. An interesting challenge, designing a weapon to harm someone effectively invulnerable. But you see, I needed to know your limits. I needed to understand exactly what you were before making my final determination." "Determination about what?" Kirk asked. "About whether you're an asset to be recruited, a threat to be neutralized, or a tool to be utilized." Control's expression remained pleasant, conversational, as if discussing whether rather than potential murder. Section 31 exists to protect the Federation from threats its citizens don't want to acknowledge. Threats that require methods Starfleet won't officially sanction. And you, Mr. Kal-El, are potentially the greatest threat, or the greatest asset, the Federation has ever encountered. "I don't want anything to do with your organization," Clark said firmly. "I suspected as much. Which brings us to the real question: if you won't work with us, and you're too powerful to be safely ignored, what exactly do we do with you?" Control's smile faded. "The probe fragments you've been analyzing? We've already copied all the data. The dimensional bridge you're trying to rebuild? We understand the physics better than you do. We could send you home, Captain Kirk. Or we could ensure he never leaves this universe, becomes a permanent Federation asset, willingly or otherwise." Kirk felt his hand move toward the phaser at his belt, but Control raised one finger in a gentle warning gesture. "I wouldn't, Captain. I'm not actually here, this is a holographic projection transmitted through your ship's systems. You can't hurt me, can't arrest me, can't even verify where I'm transmitting from. But I can hurt you, can decompress your bridge, overload your warp core, do any number of unpleasant things if you force my hand." "What do you want?" Kirk asked. "A decision. From you, Mr. Kal-El, join Section 31, work with us to protect the Federation from threats that require your unique capabilities. In exchange, we'll provide resources to help you adapt to this universe, shelter from those who would exploit you, and eventually, when you've proven your loyalty, a way home. And if I refuse? Then we ensure you remain in this universe under circumstances considerably less pleasant than Captain Kirk's hospitality. We have facilities, Mr. Kal-El, places where even someone with your abilities could be safely contained, studied, and, if necessary, dissected to understand exactly what makes you function." Clark's eyes blazed red, heat vision building. "You're threatening me. I'm offering you a choice. Work with us, or against us. But understand, you don't get to be neutral. You're too powerful, too valuable, too dangerous. The moment you arrived in our universe, you became a strategic asset. The only question is whose asset you'll be." Kirk stepped between Control and Clark. "He's under my protection. Under Federation law, he has rights. Federation law is a luxury afforded to those who don't threaten its existence. Section 31 operates beyond such limitations." Control's expression remained pleasant. "You have 48 hours to reach Starbase 12. When you arrive, Mr. Kal-El will make his choice. Join us, or face the consequences. Think carefully, both of you. Some prisons don't have walls, they have radiation fields tuned to specific wavelengths. The hologram flickered and vanished. The bridge was silent. Kirk turned to Spock. "Did you trace that transmission?" "I attempted to." The signal was routed through 17 different relay stations across 3 sectors. Origin point is effectively untraceable. Spock's expression was troubled. "Captain, if Section 31 has complete access to the probe data, then they can build their own dimensional bridge. They don't need Clark's cooperation to study Kryptonian technology." Kirk looked at Clark, seeing the fear and anger warring in the man's expression. "They want you specifically. The question is why?" "Because I'm powerful enough to change everything," Clark said quietly. "On my Earth, I learned early that power attracts attention, governments, militaries, people who see me as a tool to be used rather than a person to be respected. I thought coming to another universe might be different." He laughed bitterly. "I guess some things really are universal." "We're not giving up," Kirk said firmly. "We have 48 hours. That's enough time to reach Starbase 12, analyze the probe data ourselves, and figure out our next move." "Against Section 31? Captain, they've infiltrated your own organization. They can access your systems, monitor your communications, strike from the shadows whenever they want." Clark's voice carried defeat. "Maybe I should just surrender. Let them study me. At least then you and your crew would be safe." "That's not happening." Kirk's voice carried absolute conviction. "We didn't come this far, risk this much, just to hand you over to people who see you as a specimen. You said on your Earth you use your power to protect people. Well, in this universe, sometimes protecting people means letting them protect you." Spock cleared his throat. "Captain, I may have a solution. It is highly unorthodox and carries significant risks, but given the circumstances." "I'm listening, Mr. Spock." "The probe fragments contain dimensional bridge technology. Section 31 may have copied the data, but they don't have Mr. Kent, whose biological energy signature is required to actually power the bridge. If we could complete the bridge reconstruction and activate it before reaching Starbase 12, we could send Mr. Kent home and remove him as a strategic variable entirely." "How long would that take?" "Unknown. The fragments are incomplete, and much of the reconstruction would be theoretical. However, with Mr. Kent's knowledge of Kryptonian science and our computational resources, I estimate a 73% chance of success within 48 hours. Kirk looked at Clark. "Your call, Mr. Kent. We try to send you home before Section 31 can stop us, or we go to Starbase 12 and face whatever they have planned." Clark was silent for a long moment, staring out at the stars streaking past on the view screen. Finally, he spoke. "On my Earth, there's a saying, home is where the heart is. I've spent my whole life trying to find where I belong. Krypton was destroyed before I knew it. Earth raised me, but I'm not human. I've always been caught between worlds." He turned to Kirk. "But if there's a chance to go back, to return to the universe where I can actually make a difference without starting wars or becoming a weapon, I have to take it." "Then that's what we'll do." Kirk turned to his crew. "All departments, Priority 1, reconstruction of the Kryptonian probe. Mr. Spock, coordinate all scientific resources. Scotty, we'll need the warp core for power generation when the time comes. Uhura, monitor all channels for Section 31 activity." He sat in his command chair. "We have 48 hours to do the impossible. Let's get to work." As the crew dispersed to their tasks, Kirk couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against more than just a countdown. Somewhere in the shadows, Section 31 was watching, planning, preparing their next move. The game had changed. No longer were they simply trying to send one man home. Now they were fighting to prove that in the Federation, people were more than tools, that power didn't give you the right to use others, that even in the darkest situations, there were lines you didn't cross. And if they succeeded, they'd prove something even more important, that sometimes, the right choice was the hardest one. But first, they had to survive the next 48 hours. The Enterprise's main science lab had transformed into something resembling organized chaos. Crystalline probe fragments covered every available surface, each piece carefully catalogued and analyzed. Holographic displays showed three-dimensional models of Kryptonian dimensional theory, their alien mathematics floating in midair like frozen thought. Clark stood at the center of it all, explaining concepts that pushed the boundaries of Federation science. The dimensional membrane isn't a physical barrier, Clark said, manipulating a hologram to show layers of reality stacked like translucent sheets. It's more like a frequency difference. Your universe vibrates at one quantum signature, mine at another. The probe was designed to detect natural weak points where those frequencies align, places where crossing over would require minimal energy. Spock studied the display, his fingers steepled in concentration. Fascinating. This suggests that dimensional travel isn't about breaking through barriers, but rather finding harmonic resonance points where the barriers are naturally thin. Exactly. But when the probe couldn't find a natural weak point, it tried to create an artificial one by brute force. That's what caused the dimensional tear, forcing frequencies to align when they weren't meant to. Which means, Kirk said, following the logic, if we try the same method, we risk creating another uncontrolled rupture. Right. We need to find a natural weak point, a place where the dimensional membrane is already thin. Then we can use the probe's technology to gently widen that opening, slip through, and let it close naturally behind me. Scotty looked up from where he'd been examining the power requirements. That's all well and good in theory. But the energy needed just to scan for these weak points, we're talking about the entire warp core output for hours, maybe days. And if we find one and try to open it? Captain, we'd need to channel power levels that could overload every system on the ship. Could we use Mr. Kent's biological energy to supplement the warp core? Spock asked. Clark nodded. That's how the probe did it originally. It drew on my cellular energy reserves. But Spock, I wasn't exactly in control during that process. The probe drained me to dangerous levels, levels that would have killed a human instantly. If we're going to do this deliberately, we need safeguards. Then we build them. Kirk's tone brooked no argument. Mr. Spock, work with Mr. Kent on the theoretical framework. Scotty, I want power distribution models, how much energy we can safely channel without blowing up the ship. Dr. McCoy, you'll monitor Mr. Kent's biological status during the process. If he's in danger, you pull the plug immediately. Jim, I'm a doctor, not a dimensional physicist, I know, bones. But you're the best medical mind we've got. Figure it out. The next 36 hours blurred into a marathon of calculation, simulation, and increasingly desperate attempts to solve an impossible puzzle. Sleep became a luxury no one could afford. Meals were consumed at workstations. The crew operated on adrenaline, coffee, and the stubborn determination that they could make this work. Kirk divided his time between the science lab and the bridge, monitoring both their progress and the countdown to their arrival at Starbase 12. 24 hours remaining. 18 hours. 12. During the 12th hour, Uhura detected something that sent the entire operation into overdrive. Captain, I'm picking up a transmission from Starbase 12. They're expecting us in 12 hours for Mr. Kent's evaluation. The transmission includes specifications for a containment facility. Her voice tightened. Sir, it's designed to emit continuous red solar radiation. If they put him in there, he'd be powerless, Kirk finished. How long until we reach the starbase? At current speed, 11 hours and 43 minutes. And how long until we can attempt opening a dimensional bridge? Spock looked up from his console, his expression carefully neutral. Unknown, Captain. We have identified 17 potential weak points within scanning range, but determining which might connect to Mr. Kent's universe requires detailed analysis. I estimate 6 to 8 more hours before we can make an informed attempt. Then we're cutting it close. Kirk studied the chronometer. They'd reach Starbase 12 with perhaps 3 or 4 hours to spare, assuming everything went perfectly, which it never did. Can we slow down? Buy more time? Not without arousing suspicion, Spock replied. Starbase 12 is monitoring our approach. Any deviation from expected arrival time would likely trigger an immediate response. Kirk nodded, making his decision. Then we work faster. All non-essential personnel are reassigned to assist the science teams. We run multiple simulations simultaneously. And if we're not ready when we arrive at the starbase, he looked at Clark. We'll find another way. But Clark's expression suggested he knew the truth. If they arrived without completing the dimensional bridge, Section 31 would take custody. There would be no appeal, no legal protection, no rescue operation. The man who could survive in vacuum and fly faster than starships would disappear into a facility designed specifically to neutralize his abilities. Clark returned to the probe fragments with renewed intensity, his fingers tracing crystalline structures as he searched for the key to going home. 8 hours remaining. The Enterprise approached the borders of Federation core space, where Starfleet's presence was strongest and options for resistance diminished with every passing parsec. Spock had narrowed the potential weak points down to 3-dimensional membranes that showed promising harmonic signatures. Each would require testing, calibration, and careful energy management to determine if it led to Clark's universe or somewhere else entirely. The first candidate is located 0.7 light-years off our current course, Spock reported. It shows a quantum frequency variance of approximately 3% from theoretical models of Mr. Kent's home dimension. The second candidate is 5 light-years in the opposite direction, Kirk interrupted, seeing the tactical problem. If we divert to test the first site and it doesn't work, we won't have time to reach the others before the starbase intercepts us. Correct. We have, in essence, one attempt. If we choose incorrectly, we fail. Kirk looked at Clark. Mr. Kent, is there any way to know which weak point leads home? Clark closed his eyes, and Kirk saw him straining to perceive something beyond normal senses. I can feel something. A resonance, like a tuning fork that matches my cellular frequency. It's faint, but, his eyes opened, focusing on the second candidate location. There. That one feels right. Feels right? Scotty's engineering mind clearly struggled with such subjective analysis. Laddie, we're betting the entire operation on a feeling? His cellular structure is quantum entangled with his home universe, Spock said thoughtfully. It's possible Mr. Kent can perceive dimensional frequencies in ways our instruments cannot. The phenomenon would be analogous to how migrating birds sense magnetic fields. Then we go with his instinct. Kirk turned to Sulu. Mr. Sulu, alter course for the second candidate location. Maximum warp. We don't have time for subtle. The Enterprise veered off course, accelerating toward coordinates that existed between the spaces of normal reality. Behind them, Kirk knew, Starbase 12 would detect the deviation. Questions would be asked. Demands for explanation would be transmitted. But by the time those communications reached them, they'd either succeeded or failed, there was no middle ground left. 4 hours remaining. The Enterprise arrived at the coordinates Spock had calculated, a region of space that looked no different from any other, empty void punctuated by distant stars. Mr. Spock, readings? The dimensional membrane here shows significant thinning. Quantum flux measurements indicate a natural weak point approximately 300 meters off the port bow. Captain, this location is as close to ideal as we could hope for. Then let's use it. Mr. Scott, status on power distribution? Warp core is at maximum capacity. I've routed every available system through the dimensional bridge apparatus. Life support is on emergency reserves, shields are down, weapons offline. If this doesn't work, we'll be sitting ducks. If this doesn't work, we'll have bigger problems than defenselessness. Dr. McCoy, how's our patient? McCoy's voice came through from the medical station they'd set up in the science lab. Clark's cellular energy is fully charged, as much yellow sun radiation as his body can store. But Jim, once we start this process, we're going to be draining him faster than a matter/antimatter reaction. If something goes wrong, if the energy flow becomes unstable, then you shut it down and get him to sickbay. I know the drill, Bones. Kirk took a deep breath. This was it, the moment where careful planning met unpredictable reality. Mr. Kent, you're certain about this? Clark stood at the center of a modified transporter platform, surrounded by crystalline probe fragments arranged in a geometric pattern that Spock had calculated with Kryptonian mathematics. Energy conduits ran from the warp core through the fragments and would channel through Clark's body, using his biological energy as a focusing lens. I'm certain, Captain. Clark's voice was steady, but Kirk could see the fear beneath. Fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear that he'd never see home again. Thank you, Captain Kirk. For everything you've done, for believing me when you had no reason to, for... Save the goodbyes for when we know this works, Kirk interrupted gently. We're not done yet. Clark smiled. Right. Let's do this. Mr. Spock, begin the sequence. Spock's fingers moved across his console with precise efficiency. Initiating dimensional scan. Channeling warp core energy through crystalline matrix. Power levels rising, 10%, 20%, 40%. The probe fragments began to glow, their internal structures lighting up with energy that seemed to exist outside normal spectrum. Clark's body started to illuminate as well, his cells absorbing and redirecting massive amounts of power. 60%. Mr. Kent's cellular output is synchronizing with the warp field harmonics. I am detecting dimensional membrane response. Reality rippled. The air in the science lab took on a quality that Kirk's brain struggled to process, as if he were looking at 3 dimensions trying to occupy the same space simultaneously. Colors bled into spectrums that shouldn't exist. Sounds echoed before they were made. 80%. The dimensional membrane is thinning. I am detecting, Spock's voice carried a note of wonder. Captain, I am detecting multiple universes. Infinite variations, infinite possibilities, all pressing against the membrane like light through a prism. Can you identify Clark's home universe? Attempting to. Mr. Kent, I need you to focus on your cellular resonance. Your quantum signature should act as a beacon. Clark's eyes closed, his face strained with concentration. The glow around him intensified, and Kirk saw something impossible, a window opening in mid-air, showing glimpses of another world. Not just another place, but another reality entirely. I see it, Clark breathed. I can see Earth. My Earth. It's... The Enterprise lurched violently. Every light on the ship flickered, and Kirk heard Scotty's frantic voice over the intercom. Captain. We're being hit with some kind of dampening field. External source, incredibly powerful, it's draining our warp core. Source? Kirk demanded. Unknown, but it's, static consumed Scotty's voice. On the view screen, a ship decloaked directly ahead of them. Not Klingon, not Romulan, Federation design, but modified beyond recognition. Sleek, black, covered in sensor-absorbing hull materials that made it nearly invisible to detection. And on every surface, the insignia of Section 31. They found us, Clark said, his voice hollow. The dimensional window began to collapse, the probe fragments dimming as the Section 31 vessel's dampening field drained the Enterprise's power. Kirk watched their chance slipping away, watched the window to another universe closing like a door slamming shut. Mr. Spock, can you compensate for the dampening field? Negative. Their technology is specifically designed to interfere with our power distribution. We would need, Spock paused. Captain, if we redirected all remaining power, including life support and emergency reserves, we might maintain the dimensional bridge for approximately 90 seconds. 90 seconds to get Mr. Kent through the portal? Correct. However, such action would leave the Enterprise completely powerless in the presence of a hostile vessel. We would be defenseless. Kirk looked at Clark, saw the desperate hope warring with guilt in his eyes. This was the moment: sacrifice the Enterprise's safety to save one man, or close the portal and face Section 31's custody. Every regulation, every principle of command, said protect the ship. 430 crew members outweighed one individual, no matter how extraordinary. But Jim Kirk had never been good at following regulations when they conflicted with what was right. Do it. Redirect all power to the dimensional bridge. Captain, Spock began. That's an order, Mr. Spock. Get him home. Spock's fingers flew across the console. The Enterprise went dark, lights failing, gravity fluctuating, life support systems shutting down one by one. But in the science lab, the probe fragments blazed with light, and the dimensional window reopened, stable and bright. Mr. Kent, Kirk said quietly, go. Now. Before they find a way to close it permanently. Clark looked at Kirk, and in that moment, understanding passed between them, the recognition of two men who valued principles above safety, who knew that some choices transcended logic or self-preservation. Thank you, Captain. For showing me that some things really are universal: courage, honor, doing what's right even when it's hard. Clark moved toward the dimensional window, then paused. If you ever need help, if your universe ever faces something you can't handle alone, find a way to call. I'll come. I'll remember that. Now go, before. A voice cut through the lab, cold, electronic, utterly inhuman. Dimensional bridge destabilization in progress. Subject will not escape custody. The Section 31 vessel fired, not weapons, but a focused beam of red solar radiation that lanced through space and struck Clark directly. He stumbled, the glow around him flickering as his cells struggled against the energy designed to hurt him. Captain, Spock said urgently, the portal is collapsing. Mr. Kent has approximately 30 seconds before the window closes permanently. Clark staggered forward, fighting through the red radiation, every step an act of supreme will. Kirk watched, helpless, as the man who could move faster than light struggled to cross 10 meters of open space. 20 seconds. Clark reached the dimensional window's edge, his hand touching the threshold between universes. Kirk could see another world beyond, blue skies, a city skyline that looked almost familiar but subtly different, home. 15 seconds. I won't make it, Clark gasped. The radiation, it's draining me too fast. You'll make it, Kirk said with absolute conviction. Because you're Superman. And Superman doesn't quit. Something in those words, the name, the reminder of who he was, seemed to ignite something in Clark. His eyes blazed red, not with heat vision but with pure determination. He pushed through the red radiation like a man walking through a hurricane, every muscle straining, every cell screaming in protest. 10 seconds. Clark dove through the dimensional window. 5 seconds. The red radiation beam intensified, trying to pull him back, but Clark was already through, already home, already gone. The dimensional window collapsed with a sound like reality itself sighing in relief. The probe fragments went dark. The science lab returned to normal, though normal now felt somehow diminished, as if something vital had been taken away. He made it, Spock confirmed, studying his readings. The dimensional bridge closed cleanly behind him. He is home, Captain. Kirk allowed himself one moment of satisfaction before reality reasserted itself. The Enterprise was completely powerless, drifting in space, and a Section 31 vessel hung nearby like a predator that had just been denied its prey. "All hands," Kirk said into the ship-wide comm, hoping emergency backup systems would carry his voice, "prepare for boarding action. This is not a drill." But the Section 31 vessel didn't move to board. It simply waited. Then Control's voice filled the bridge, not through communication systems, but through some method that bypassed conventional technology entirely. "Well played, Captain Kirk. You sacrificed your ship to send him home. Very noble. Very predictable. And ultimately, very pointless." "He's gone," Kirk said. "Your plans for him are finished." "Are they? Tell me, Captain, did you really think we didn't have contingencies? Did you honestly believe we'd let a strategic asset of that magnitude simply disappear?" Control's laugh was cold. "The dimensional bridge worked in both directions. We have the probe data. We understand the physics now. And we have Mr. Kent's quantum signature, his unique dimensional frequency, recorded in exquisite detail." Kirk felt his blood run cold. "You're going to bring him back. Eventually. When we've prepared appropriate facilities, when we have everything in place to ensure he can be properly controlled. But don't worry, Captain, you won't live to see it. You've interfered with Section 31 operations one too many times. You've proven yourself a liability rather than an asset." The Section 31 vessel's weapon ports began to glow, not phasers or torpedoes, but something else. Something that made Kirk's tactical instincts scream danger. "Goodbye, Captain Kirk. The Federation will remember you as a hero who died protecting a colony from Romulan aggression. Tragic, noble, utterly necessary. Your crew will be reassigned. Your ship will be..." A brilliant flash of light erupted from nowhere, a phaser blast at full power, striking the Section 31 vessel's weapon array and triggering a catastrophic overload. The mysterious ship staggered, shields flaring, weapon systems exploding in sequence. Kirk spun to look at the viewscreen, trying to identify their savior. 3 starships dropped out of warp in perfect formation, Constitution class, proud and powerful, Federation insignia gleaming. And at their head, a ship Kirk recognized immediately. The USS Lexington, commanded by Commodore Wesley, one of Starfleet's most respected officers. Wesley's face appeared on the viewscreen, his expression grim. "Enterprise, this is Commodore Wesley. Stand down, Section 31 vessel, or the next volley won't be a warning shot." The Section 31 ship went dark, its power systems failing from the phaser strike. Whatever stealth technology had made it nearly invisible was offline, revealing it as a modified Federation design bristling with unauthorized weapons. "Captain Kirk," Wesley said, "we've been tracking that vessel for 3 months. Starfleet Command received your transmission about the Romulan-Klingon conspiracy and started digging. What we found," his jaw tightened. "We found evidence of Section 31 operations so far beyond their mandate that even the admirals who knew about them were shocked. You've exposed something significant, Jim. Something that's going to shake Starfleet to its foundations." Kirk felt the weight of command lift slightly. They'd survived. They'd succeeded. Clark was home, and the conspiracy that tried to turn him into a weapon was exposed. "Commodore, we're going to need power restoration. Our warp core is completely drained. Already dispatching engineering teams. We'll have you operational in a few hours." Wesley's expression softened. "And Jim? Well done. Whatever happened out here, whatever rules you bent or broke, you made the right call." As Lexington's engineering teams began beaming aboard, as power slowly returned to the Enterprise, Kirk sat in his command chair and allowed himself to acknowledge the exhaustion that had been building for days. "Captain," Spock said quietly, "Mr. Kent left something." He handed Kirk a data slate containing a message recorded during the final moments before Clark went through the portal. Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, Dr. McCoy, and all the crew of the Enterprise, thank you for showing me that courage, honor, and doing what's right aren't unique to any one universe. They're universal principles that transcend dimensions. You risked everything to help a stranger find his way home. I'll never forget that. And if someday you need help from across the dimensional divide, find a way to call. I'll come running. Kal-El. Kirk smiled, setting the slate aside. Mr. Spock, log this mission as Contact Protocol 7, first peaceful dimensional exchange and successful return of an interdimensional visitor. An optimistic classification, Captain, considering the political complications. We sent him home, Spock. That's what matters. As the Enterprise's systems slowly came back online, as Starfleet vessels secured the Section 31 ship and its crew, Kirk reflected on the impossible week they just survived. A man had fallen from another universe, powerful enough to reshape the quadrant, vulnerable enough to need protection. And somehow, despite conspiracies and weapons and forces that wanted to turn him into a tool, they'd done the right thing. They'd sent Superman home. And in doing so, they'd proven that even in the vast complexity of interstellar politics, sometimes the simplest answer was the right one: help those who need it, protect those in danger, and trust that courage matters more than power. The frontier was vast, full of dangers Kirk couldn't predict and challenges he couldn't prepare for. But if they could handle this, if they could send a god home when empires wanted to claim him as a weapon, then maybe, just maybe, they could handle whatever came next. In the darkness between stars, the Enterprise resumed its journey, carrying a crew that had just learned they were capable of impossible things. And somewhere in another universe, a man in a blue suit and red cape looked up at an unfamiliar sky and smiled, grateful to be home. 3 weeks after the dimensional bridge collapsed and Clark Kent returned home, Captain Kirk sat in the officers' briefing room aboard Starbase 12, the very facility that was supposed to have been Superman's prison. Instead, it had become the site of the most significant intelligence debriefing in recent Federation history. Admiral Comac sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 representatives from the Federation Council and a Starfleet JAG officer whose job was to determine whether Kirk's actions constituted heroism or insubordination. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of testimony, analysis, and political maneuvering as Starfleet attempted to understand what had happened and, more importantly, what it meant. Let me make sure I understand the situation correctly, Counselor Tsaren of Vulcan said, her logical mind clearly struggling with the implications. A being from a parallel universe arrived in our dimension through an accidental dimensional bridge. This being possessed abilities that rivaled or exceeded anything in our technological arsenal. Multiple hostile intelligence services attempted to either capture or kill him, culminating in a conspiracy that involved elements of our own Section 31, the Romulan Neutral and Klingon intelligence. And Captain Kirk's response was to expend his ship's entire power reserves to send this individual home, despite orders to bring him here for evaluation. That's correct, Counselor, Kirk replied. And in doing so, you exposed a Section 31 operation that had been running unauthorized missions for over a year, including the deliberate murder of Federation civilians to create strategic situations. Also correct. Tsaren's eyebrow rose in the Vulcan equivalent of profound surprise. Fascinating. Captain, you understand that by any strict interpretation of Starfleet regulations, your actions constitute multiple violations, deviation from direct orders, unauthorized use of classified technology, reckless endangerment of your vessel and crew. I do, Counselor. And yet, Admiral Comac interjected, those same actions prevented a potential war with both the Klingon Empire and the Romulan Star Empire, exposed a criminal conspiracy within our own intelligence services, and successfully resolved a first contact situation with an extra-dimensional being without loss of life or diplomatic incident. He looked at Kirk with an expression that was equal parts frustration and grudging admiration. Captain Kirk, you have an absolutely infuriating habit of being right when you should be wrong. I prefer to think of it as being adaptable, Admiral. The JAG officer, a stern woman named Commander Strauss, spoke up. Captain, walk me through your decision-making process. You had direct orders to bring Mr. Kent here for evaluation. At what point did you decide to disregard those orders? Kirk considered his answer carefully. Commander, I never disregarded the orders. I interpreted them in the context of changing circumstances. When I learned that the evaluation was actually a plan to indefinitely imprison Mr. Kent in a facility designed to neutralize his abilities, the orders ceased to represent their stated purpose. They became a mechanism for something else, something that violated everything Starfleet stands for. You're saying you followed the spirit of the law rather than the letter? I'm saying I followed the principle that guided those laws in the first place, that individuals have rights, that power doesn't give you authority to abuse others, and that sometimes doing what's right means questioning orders that conflict with those principles. Counselor Tsaren exchanged glances with her human colleague, Counselor Martinez. Captain, you're aware that this argument could be used to justify any deviation from orders? It could, Kirk acknowledged. Which is why command is about judgment, not just obedience. I made a judgment call based on the information available and the principles I swore to uphold when I accepted this uniform. If you believe that judgment was wrong, I'll accept the consequences. Admiral Comac leaned back in his chair, studying Kirk for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. The Federation Council has reviewed all evidence related to this incident. The Section 31 personnel involved have been arrested and are facing charges ranging from conspiracy to murder. The Romulan and Klingon governments have both issued formal apologies for the unauthorized actions of their intelligence services. And Mr. Kent, he paused, is presumably back in his own universe, having left behind enough probe data that our scientists will be studying dimensional physics for decades. So what's the verdict? Kirk asked. The verdict, Captain, is that you're being awarded the Federation Medal of Honor for exceptional conduct in the face of unprecedented circumstances. Simultaneously, you're being issued a formal reprimand for deviation from direct orders. Comac's expression was wry. Congratulations. You're both a hero and a problem, which seems to be your natural state. Kirk allowed himself a slight smile. Thank you, Admiral. I think. Don't thank me yet. There's more. Comac pulled up a holographic display showing star charts and classified intelligence reports. In the 3 weeks since Mr. Kent returned to his universe, we've detected 47 attempted dimensional breaches across Federation space. Someone, or multiple someones, is trying to recreate what you did. We believe various intelligence services obtained partial probe data before the dimensional bridge collapsed. They're trying to access parallel universes, possibly to find their own superpowered beings or to exploit resources from alternate realities. Can they succeed? Kirk asked. Unknown. But the fact that they're trying represents a new category of threat. We're not just defending against enemies in our own universe anymore, we're potentially facing threats from infinite parallel realities. Comac looked at Kirk seriously. Which is why I'm assigning the Enterprise to a new mission. You're going to lead a task force investigating dimensional phenomena, establishing protocols for interdimensional contact, and preventing unauthorized dimensional travel. You want us to become Dimensional Border Patrol. I want you to ensure that what happened with Mr. Kent doesn't happen again, not because we're afraid of helping people, but because we need to understand the implications before we start opening doors we can't close. Comac stood, signaling the meeting's end. You've got 1 week to complete repairs and resupply. Then you're heading to the triangular system to investigate reports of another dimensional anomaly. Dismissed. As the room emptied, Spock remained behind with Kirk. Captain, a question. Go ahead, Spock. Do you believe we made the correct choice? Sending Mr. Kent home rather than studying the phenomena he represented could be considered a missed opportunity. The scientific knowledge we might have gained would have come at the cost of one man's freedom, Kirk finished. Spock, I know you value knowledge, and I know the potential discoveries we gave up by letting Clark go home. But some things are more important than scientific advancement. Like remembering that people aren't experiments, that power doesn't give you the right to imprison others, and that sometimes the best thing you can do is simply help someone get home. Spock's expression was thoughtful. A logical argument, though it prioritizes ethical considerations over purely scientific ones. I find myself agreeing with your assessment, Captain. Though I would note that Mr. Kent's presence here did yield significant scientific data, we now have proof that parallel universes exist, that dimensional travel is possible, and that the laws of physics can vary significantly between realities. See? We got scientific advancement and did the right thing. Best of both worlds. An optimistic interpretation. However, Spock paused, something unusual for the logical Vulcan. I believe Mr. Kent would approve. Kirk smiled. I think he would too. Later that evening, Kirk stood alone in his quarters aboard the Enterprise, staring out at the stars and thinking about the impossible week they'd survived. A man had fallen from the sky, or rather, from another universe entirely, and in the process had challenged everything Kirk thought he understood about power, responsibility, and what it meant to do the right thing. The door chimed. Come. McCoy entered, carrying 2 glasses and a bottle of Saurian brandy. Figured you could use a drink after that circus of a debriefing. Bones, you're a mind reader. Kirk accepted the glass gratefully. McCoy poured generous amounts, then raised his glass. To Superman. May he be happy wherever, or whatever universe, he is. To Superman, Kirk echoed, clinking glasses. They drank in comfortable silence for a moment, then McCoy spoke again. Jim, you ever wonder if we'll see him again? I mean, the dimensional bridge worked. We proved it's possible to cross between universes. What's to stop him from coming back someday? Nothing, I suppose. But I don't think he will, not unless there's a damn good reason. He wanted to go home, Bones. Home to a universe where he knows the rules, where his power makes sense, where he can help people without starting wars or becoming a strategic asset. Kirk swirled the brandy in his glass. Though he did say if we ever needed help, you'd call, and he'd come running. I remember. McCoy shook his head. Never thought I'd see the day when we'd have a genuine superhero aboard this ship. Made me rethink a few things about what's possible. Like what? Like maybe there's more to the universe than we can explain with science. Maybe there's room for things that seem impossible, people who can fly, beings of pure goodness, powers that defy explanation. Hell, Jim, we sent a god home. That's got to count for something in the cosmic ledger. Kirk smiled. If there is a cosmic ledger, I hope it notes that we did it the right way. Not because regulations said so, or because it was strategically sound, but because it was simply the right thing to do. Think the Federation learned that lesson? Some did. Others are probably already plotting how to exploit dimensional travel for strategic advantage. That's why we've got our new assignment, making sure the Clark Kents of parallel universes don't get turned into weapons by people who see power as something to control rather than respect. McCoy raised his glass again. Then here's to our new mission. May we be as good at protecting dimensional borders as we were at protecting one impossible man. They drank, and Kirk felt the weight of command settle back into its familiar place. The frontier was vast, filled with dangers both known and unknown. Now it included entire parallel universes, infinite variations of reality where anything was possible. But if they could handle Superman, if they could navigate the impossible politics of gods and empires and shadow organizations, then maybe they could handle whatever came next. Far away, in a universe that vibrated at a slightly different quantum frequency, Clark Kent stood on the roof of the Daily Planet building, watching the sun set over Metropolis. His city. His world. Home. The past 3 weeks had been strange, readjusting to a universe where he knew the rules, where his powers worked at full capacity without dimensional interference, where he was simply Superman rather than a strategic asset or weapon to be controlled. He'd told no one about his journey to another universe. How could he explain it? That he'd met a starship captain who valued principles over pragmatism, a logical alien who understood the importance of emotion, a doctor who saw him as a patient rather than a specimen? That he'd been offered a window into a universe where humanity had achieved the dream of peaceful space exploration, where diverse species worked together despite their differences, where ideals actually mattered? His communicator buzzed, Lois Lane, demanding to know where he'd been for the past week. Bruce Wayne, asking if he'd seen the latest alien incursion reports. Diana, inviting him to a Justice League meeting to discuss interdimensional threat protocols. Clark smiled. His life was complicated, dangerous, full of impossible choices and moral dilemmas. But it was his life, in his universe, where he belonged. Still, as he stood on that rooftop watching the sun set, he couldn't help but wonder about the Enterprise. About Kirk and his crew, sailing between the stars in their mission of exploration and discovery. About whether they'd encounter more dimensional anomalies, more impossible situations, more beings who needed help finding their way home. And he made himself a promise: if they ever did need help, if somehow a message reached across the dimensional divide calling for assistance, he'd answer. Because some things were universal. Courage. Honor. Helping those in need. And the understanding that doing what's right sometimes means crossing impossible distances to stand beside those who share your values. The sun dipped below the horizon, and Superman took flight, soaring above his city with renewed appreciation for the simple fact of being home. In another universe, a starship continued its journey through the cosmos. And in the space between realities, where dimensions pressed against each other like pages in an infinite book, the possibility remained that someday, somehow, their paths might cross again. But for now, both were exactly where they needed to be, Superman protecting his Earth, and Captain Kirk protecting the frontier. Two heroes, two universes, one understanding, that power without principle is meaningless, that strength without compassion is hollow, and that sometimes the greatest victory is simply helping someone find their way home. Captain's Log, Stardate 3942.7. 3 months have passed since the incident involving the interdimensional visitor known as Kal-El. Starfleet Command has classified most details of the encounter, though certain elements have been declassified for diplomatic purposes. The Klingon Empire and Romulan Star Empire have both signed amended treaties acknowledging that unauthorized intelligence operations will be jointly investigated. Section 31's activities are under review, though I suspect the organization itself will survive in some form. Shadows always exist, even in the brightest light. The Enterprise has been assigned to investigate dimensional phenomena across Federation space. So far, we've identified 12 natural weak points in the dimensional membrane, though none have shown signs of active breach. We've established monitoring stations and protocols for interdimensional contact, should it occur again. Dr. McCoy occasionally jokes that we should leave our coordinates somewhere in case Mr. Kent needs to visit. Mr. Spock points out that dimensional coordinates don't work that way. I prefer to think that if we ever truly needed him, he'd find a way. The probe fragments remain in our science lab, a reminder that the universe, or rather, the multiverse, is far stranger and more wondrous than we imagined. We've proven that barriers between realities can be crossed, that impossible beings exist beyond our dimension, and that doing what's right sometimes means defying logic, orders, and common sense. I wouldn't have it any other way. We continue our mission of exploration and discovery, knowing now that the frontier extends beyond our universe into infinite parallel realities. Whatever we encounter out here, whatever impossible situations we face, I'm confident that this crew will handle it with the same courage and principle they demonstrated when a man fell from the sky and needed our help getting home. The universe is vast, infinite, full of mysteries we may never fully understand. But some truths remain constant across all dimensions, that courage matters, that principles are worth fighting for, and that sometimes the greatest power is simply choosing to do what's right, even when it's hard. Kirk out. Live long and prosper. Hit the subscribe button for more amazing stories.